Chapter 180. Jiang Pingji was more concerned about the fact that they were the first members of the Lu family. She even personally came out to protect Meng Hun and his men. For the sake of caution, these people were all servants that the Lu family had just bought. Their birthplaces and origins could all be checked. However, Jiang Pingji seemed to be thinking too much. It was impossible for the guards at the gate to inspect the carriages of the Lu family. Only a greenhorn who had just taken up his post and did not know anything would carefully inspect the carriages of the nobles. If they met someone with a good temper, they might praise them for abiding by their duties and strictly enforcing the law. But if they met someone with a bad temper and disdain for the common people, anyone who dared to inspect the carriages and delay the nobles' time would definitely be taught a lesson. So when the guards saw the emblem of the Lu family on the carriages, they all put on flattering smiles and let them pass without further inspection. These guards were experienced guards of the city gates. They could recognize even the most inconspicuous emblem of a poor family in Hejin County. Not to mention, the Lu family's current status was not bad. With Lu Shi, the county chief in the court, no one dared to take the initiative to provoke them. Jiang Pingji was happy to see them make things easier for them. Of course, she wouldn't say anything. Jiang Pingji didn't try to curry favor with them. She just said in a casual tone, "I've already sent people to prepare enough clothes and food. It should be enough for you to recuperate for a while. I don't think you can complain about the quality of life after chasing after Meng Liang these past few days." Meng Hun didn't think that his previous life was unbearable. He deserved the care of his new master. But when he thought of his brothers who helped him escape from the Meng family's army, he couldn't help but feel a little depressed. They didn't die on the spot. They didn't get the proper care after they were injured. Their condition worsened and they died of illness. He brought his brothers out of Meng County, but he couldn't even let them return to their homeland. He could only bury them in the wilderness. "I have a presumptuous request. I don't know if you can agree to it." Meng Hun cupped his hands in front of his chest. He was very serious. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows and said, "If you have something to say, just say it. You don't have to worry about this or that. I'm not the kind of person who has too many taboos. I won't blame you for this. Just tell me." Meng Hun felt warm in his heart and said with some embarrassment, "In addition to the brothers I brought out, there are 3 others hiding in the mountains." "Are the injuries serious?" Meng Hun said, "Before, with the thing you gave me, my illness was slightly suppressed. But my body is still very weak, so I can't move. Since that's the case, wait until you've settled down at the farm, then go to the mountain to receive them. There are many ferocious beasts in the forest. It's too dangerous for the 3 of you to stay there. You're being careless." Jiang Pingji's words warmed Meng Hun's heart. Meng Hun's face was full of shame. He didn't agree either and insisted on leaving one person to take care of the wounded. However, his brothers were stubborn and refused no matter what he said. How could Meng Hun dare to disappoint such sincere feelings? Only by killing their enemies with their own hands and taking revenge would they be able to get back at them. "Thank you for your understanding, Lang Jun." Jiang Pingji didn't say anything. After all, to her, it was as easy as lifting a finger, but to Meng Hun, it was life-saving. "The training of the farm is currently in Xiaoyu's hands, but after you go there, I'll hand it over to you." When Meng Hun heard that, he was at a loss. He was a little flattered, but also a little uneasy. Although he didn't know who Xiaoyu was, he knew the principle of first come, first served. If he went there and asked Xiaoyu to let go of his work, that didn't seem right. Although Meng Hun was a martial artist, he also knew the ways of the world. Jiang Pingji saw his uneasiness and said, "Don't think too much. We are short of people, so we use Xiaoyu as 2 people." Meng Hun was speechless. Suddenly, He felt pity for Xiaoyu. What should he do? Did he know that he was being exploited by Lang Jun? Suddenly, a blurry figure appeared in Meng Hun's mind. It was the figure of him working diligently under Lang Jun's whip. If he knew you were going to take over, he would be happy. After all, it's not something he's good at. If he wants to do well, he needs to spend more energy and time. Jiang Pingji leaned against the table. Meng Hun was in the same car as her, and the others were in another rented car. And, to be honest, you have actually met him before. Don't be too nervous. Xiaoyu is easy to get along with. Met him before? Meng Hun asked. He tried hard to recall the relevant memory, but he couldn't find it. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, that day, he was the one with a white cloth wrapped around his face, sitting by the river and fishing. Meng Hun vaguely had an impression of him. He seemed to be a young boy. Anyway, they had met before. Meng Hun's nervousness gradually faded. He thought to himself, why should I worry about a young boy? However, Meng Hun would soon regret his thoughts. He was indeed a young boy, but he was in charge of finances and internal affairs. Su Ke could decide everyone's quality of life, but Meng Hun was clumsy with words. How could he be Su Ke's opponent? Soon, the farm was close at hand. Meng Hun sighed in his heart. He didn't expect to come here for the second time with such an identity. When they arrived, Su Ke was still diligently supervising the training of the servants, or rather, the troops. They didn't know if it was because Jiang Pingji had trained him before, but his appearance and mental state were much better than before. Hearing that his Lang Jun was here, Su Ke quickly stopped what he was doing and slightly tidied up his appearance. However, when he saw the strong man standing behind Jiang Pingji, Su Ke's polite smile froze on his face. This guy. Why is he here again? Xiaoyu, come and meet me. Jiang Pingji smiled at Su Ke and said, this is the new chief coach. His surname is Mang. Su Ke was speechless. How did they hook up in such a short time? Why didn't he know anything about it? He felt like he was still dreaming. The bullet screen was full of doubts, but Su Ke politely greeted Meng Hun. Seeing Su Ke greet him, Meng Hun subconsciously saluted him. Jiang Pingji was very satisfied with one of them. One was civil, one was military, one was internal, and the other was external. Since Coach Meng is here, I'll leave the training to him. As for the details, I'll talk to Coach Meng later. Before Jiang Pingji said anything, Su Ke already wanted to shake his hand. Meng Hun didn't expect her to shake his hand so quickly. He looked a little embarrassed. Jiang Pingji said to Su Ke impatiently, Coach Meng just arrived, and you can't wait to shake my hand. It's as if I mistreated you before. Chapter 181. Su Ke was very clear about his own ability. A person's energy was limited, and he couldn't do everything. Even if he could, it would take an unimaginable amount of time and energy. Compared to the final result, the investment was too high, and the loss outweighed the gain. Now that Meng Hun was here, it meant that he could get rid of the complicated things and have more time to study. Although the Lus were not the top aristocratic family, they had a rich collection of books. Su Ke couldn't imagine how many books there were. In the past, he loved a book like it was a treasure, and he would read it over and over again. Now, he had a whole treasure house, but he had to spend so much energy on something he was not good at. How could he not feel sad? Now that Meng Hun had taken over some of the things, Su Ke couldn't be happier. Naturally, he didn't care about his Lang Jun's teasing. But Su Ke still had some doubts. When did his Lang Jun take over Meng Hun? Although he knew that Meng Hun was good at deceiving people, Meng Hun had seen the world. Why was he so easy to trick? While Meng Hun went to help his men settle down, Jiang Pingji tilted her head and glanced at Su Ku. Why are you looking at me like I'm a human trafficker? Su Ku sighed. Lung Juan's ability to persuade people is incomparable to those human traffickers. How long has it been, and Captain Meng Hun has been subdued by you so easily? Really, speed is of the essence in war. It was so fast that I didn't even have time to react. As an accountant, he also needed time to make arrangements. As the general coach, Meng Hun's living quarters had to be spacious. Even though it couldn't be very nice, it still had to be clean and tidy. The previous batch of servants had been divided into several groups, and they were familiar with each other. Now that Meng Hun's subordinates had suddenly appeared, what if they didn't handle it well and the troops became hostile? Not to mention, Su Ku had to send someone to prepare bedding and clothes for them. Dinner should also be prepared for the people who had appeared out of nowhere. She came so suddenly and without any prior notice, he suddenly had the illusion that he was the housekeeper of the house. Speaking of which accountant would take care of so many messy trifles? Jiang Pingji's mouth twitched. Su Ku sounded as if she had done something to Meng Hun. This is probably fate. Just like how I met Xiaoyu, I should also meet Meng Hun. This time, it was Su Ku's turn to be silent. Even though a long time had passed, he still hadn't forgotten the details of that day. Su Ku looked at Jiang Pingji speechlessly and whispered to her, since Coach Meng has surrendered, does that mean Meng Liang? Yes, I've received the letter. Jiang Pingji suddenly raised her lips. That Meng Liang. Luckily he had sharp eyes when he was reincarnated. Otherwise, with that brain of his, I don't know if he could live to grow up. His IQ was touching. Meng Liang's parents must have worked hard to give birth to a son with such a low IQ and raise him into such a useless person. Su Ku asked, how much food did you ask for? About 500 stones. Meng Liang filled it in himself, but I think it's too little. How many people can eat it? Jiang Pingji snorted. She wasn't a beggar. She was looking down on her by asking for a few hundred dawn of food. Su Ku also said, 500 dawn is indeed too little. Since the Mengs don't lack food, we'll just ask for 2,000 dawn. Not to mention, the transportation team from Meng County to Hejin County will consume a huge amount of rice. While they were talking, they had increased the original price of 500 dawn of rice to 2,000 dawn. They were so arrogant that they deserved a beating. But, how do you plan to deliver this letter to the Mengs? Su Ku picked up a brush and wrote a blackmailing letter with his left hand, which he wasn't used to using. The letter stated that Meng Liang was in his hands and that if they wanted to ransom him, they had to follow the letter. They would exchange rice for Meng Hun and would not accept bribes. They had to deliver the rice within X days after receiving the letter. Of course, Meng Hun was the kidnapper. Since he had already broken up with his old boss, it was okay to break up with him even more. Jiang Pingji heard that and chuckled. She said, what's so difficult about this question? We don't have to send someone to deliver the letter all the way to the Mengs in Meng County. We just need to put the letter in the woodshed in the gambling house. Su Ku almost dropped the brush with his left hand. How could his Lang Jun be so capable? She knew everything. He felt that his brain was a little redundant and he was unhappy. How can you be so sure? Meng Liang came to Hejin County after getting rid of his entourage. In other words, it's very likely that the entourage took a detour when looking for Meng Liang. When they received the news that Meng Liang was locked up in the gambling house, it was highly likely that they would arrive 1 or 2 days later. More importantly, I didn't see any traces of Meng Liang's entourage last night. I'm guessing that they will arrive today or tomorrow at the latest. It didn't matter if Meng Liang was late by 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days. What mattered was that when those retinues arrived in Hejin County, they would definitely go to the woodshed in the gambling house to search for Meng Liang. In this way, they would naturally see two obvious bamboo slips. If the entourage knew that Meng Liang was dead, they would be afraid of the Mengs pursuing the matter. Naturally, they wouldn't dare to send the letter back. Maybe they would scatter and run for their lives. But what if they weren't sure whether Meng Liang was dead or not? Then the result would be completely different. Jiang Pingji continued leisurely. When they see the blackmail letter, they will think that the kidnappers have something to gain from it. Before their greed is satisfied, Meng Liang is still alive. In that case, they will definitely try their best to send the two letters back to Meng County in Song Prefecture as soon as possible so that Meng Liang won't be delayed and suffer. After they rescue Meng Liang, they might be able to make a great contribution. Meng Liang's death and his life were completely different. If he was dead, the Mengs wouldn't care if Meng Liang got rid of the entourage on his own. They would definitely make the entourage pay. If he was alive, even if the Mengs would punish the entourage for failing to watch over Meng Liang, they would still compensate the entourage double for Meng Liang's actions. To put it bluntly, Jiang Pingji was scheming that the entourage would risk their lives to send the two letters safely to the Mengs. Su Ke was speechless. Jiang Pingji couldn't help but laugh when she saw his hopeless expression. I know why you're asking for so many details. You're expecting me to ask you questions and then you'll tell me the same thing, aren't you? Chapter 182. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows and smiled. Then. I'll try to be more careful next time. Su Ke wanted to laugh. He had never felt so tired before. Lang Jun was sometimes too smart. She was not happy being a subordinate because there was no sense of accomplishment. She was redundant. By the way, I asked the housekeeper to look into it. I heard that Xiaoyu has a widowed aunt. Is that true? Su Ke was startled by her sudden question. He answered, there is indeed an aunt. Why do you ask? I'm just asking. I can't not know who my subordinates have. Su Ke was suspicious. According to his understanding of his Lang Jun, she never liked to waste time and energy. But he had something to say when it came to his aunt. I see. Thank you for your concern. She has been a widow for many years. Her son died young. She lives alone and is quite poor. She occasionally sews or washes clothes for people to make a living. She helped me with my mother's funeral. When I was in prison, she was the only one who secretly sent me dry food and cakes. Originally, I wanted to wait for things to settle down before returning to my hometown to bring her here to spend the rest of her life. Since you mentioned it, I have a presumptuous request. It was the second time Jiang Pingji had heard the word presumptuous request that day. She could just say it directly. Your aunt is good to you. You should be filial to her. There is nothing that can't be said. I will send someone to Zisong County to pick her up. The road will be in the wilderness. I don't trust you to travel alone. Don't worry about it. Just focus on your work. Jiang Pingji could not help but reflect. Did she look like such an unreasonable person? If she did not mention it, Su Ke would probably hold it in for another month or two before asking. Su Ke did not know what she was thinking, but he was touched by Jiang Pingji's arrangement. After all, he was already a slave. His Lang Jun did not even need to be polite to him. It was reasonable for her to order him around. These days, he did not even feel the slightest sense of inferiority or uneasiness of being a slave. Not only did he not feel that way, but he also forgot about it. It was only when he had to change the dressing for the tattoo on his face that he felt his heart bleed. The pain numbed him, and he had no choice but to face this embarrassing fact. His encounter with his Lang Jun was not a pleasant one, but he had to admit that he was impressed by him after spending so much time with him. A gentleman would die for his bosom friend. Perhaps, the young man in front of him, who was not even as tall as him, was the wise master he had been waiting for all his life. The next time you return to the manor, go and get a few months' salary in advance. Since we've brought the old lady here to enjoy her life, we can't let her work hard for a living. You're a young man, so you should treat it as a form of training for yourself. However, the elderly still need to take good care of themselves. From Jiang Pingji's point of view, the frail elderly and children belonged to the vulnerable unprotected groups. Su Ke did not hesitate this time. Instead, he accepted her kindness generously. A penny stumps a hero. Su Ke, who was good at internal affairs, understood this very well. That was why he didn't decline pretentiously, because there was no need to. He didn't have any savings and he had to rely on the Lu residents. Even if he brought his aunt over, he wouldn't be able to take good care of her. That was one of the reasons why Su Ke was worried. Fortunately, his Lang Jun was considerate and understood his difficulties. If he didn't accept it, he would be crazy. Su Ke felt relieved, as if a heavy stone had been lifted from his heart. But soon, he noticed that Jiang Pingji's eyes revealed a perplexed look, as if she was troubled by a difficult problem. Su Ke thought to himself, what kind of problem can make this young Lang Jun so perplexed? He felt that he couldn't miss this opportunity. If she had any problems, he would definitely solve them. Don't think about that problem, let him do it. Lang Jun, you look perplexed. What's troubling you? Su Ke asked softly. Jiang Pingji glanced at him and said, I'm thinking about a problem, and I seem to have an answer. What problem? Even the smart and quick-witted Lang Jun can't figure it out. Su Ke felt that it was time for him to show off his skills. Let me give you an example. Jiang Pingji pointed at Su Ke. He looked confused. She said, my original plan was that you worked hard and should be rewarded. But after my father reminded me, I realized that you would enjoy it more if you cared more about your family. The reward is the same, but obviously, you prefer the latter. This time, Su Ke was completely dumbfounded. He wanted to show his talent. After all, even his Lang Jun couldn't solve it. If he could solve it, he would be more valued. But when she asked the question, he was speechless. He didn't know how to answer. He thought that she was making fun of him, but when he looked at her expression carefully, he realized that she really didn't understand. Suddenly, Su Ke didn't know whether he should laugh or cry. If he knew that there was a word called cute in the world, he would know how he felt just now. His Lang Jun had a strange sense of cuteness. According to Ku, this can't be generalized. It varies from person to person. Su Ke wasn't that harsh to Jiang Pingji. After all, she was just a 12-year-old boy. The ways of the world required not only talent but also experience. If she didn't understand, she could teach or learn. It varies from person to person. Yes. For example, Coach Mang. The thing you asked me to prepare is what he needs now. It's what he needs. Even if it's not expensive, it's enough. As for Auntie, I've always wanted to bring Auntie over, but I've been short of money and I don't have any foundation to stand on. I don't even have the slightest idea on how to bring Auntie over safely. But your actions have solved this problem. Su Ke said seriously, to you, it's just a small effort, but to others, it's different. Isn't it a great favor to solve a difficult problem that they have no solution to? Lang Jun said it yourself. It's not about the weight of the gift, it's about the intention. The two are the same. However, a boss bribing and pacifying his subordinates, closing the distance between them, and deepening their relationship. This was originally a beautiful and hazy thing. But his Lang Jun style was different. She asked him directly, and he was the person involved. To be honest, it was a little awkward. Su Ke felt like he had nothing left to live for. Jiang Pingji was not stupid. She understood immediately that she had fallen into the wrong path. She focused on the culture of this era and the so-called bloodline, but she ignored the simplest core. I understand. I was in a dead end. Jiang Pingji nodded seriously. Chapter 183. Jiang Pingji felt as if she had cleared the fog and walked out of a dead end. Many things became clear to her. Of course, there was a huge difference between the two eras, but people's hearts were always the same. She had been stuck in a dead end. While she was thinking, Suku suddenly smiled and dared to tease her. It's rare that there are things that you don't know. Jiang Pingji didn't feel offended at all. After all, no one was perfect. She had many flaws, so there was nothing to deny. No one is omniscient and omnipotent. I don't understand these things, and I might even be wrong about them. Isn't that normal? Jiang Pingji looked at Suku with clear eyes and said, "Let me give you another example. Don't you always study hard just to learn what you don't know?" Suku almost choked on his own saliva. How could that be the same? If it weren't for his Langjuan's strong and dazzling performance, as if she was an omniscient and omnipotent person, he wouldn't have teased her like that. However, Jiang Pingji clearly recognized her shortcomings and didn't mind being teased by others. She was rare, and that was her biggest advantage. Didn't you see how the most famous prime minister, the teacher of the previous dynasty, was killed by the Gaozong? The prime minister of the previous dynasty just fulfilled his duty and was cruelly killed by the Gaozong's only son. The higher one's position was, the more they couldn't tolerate others looking at their shortcomings. Some people thought it was honest advice, while others thought it was unpleasant to the ear. But no matter which one it was, it varied from person to person. If the lord they served was broad-minded and could accept good advice, of course, they would listen to their subordinates' advice and correct their mistakes. However, if the lord they served was narrow-minded and couldn't bear to hear even half a bad word, even if they didn't flare up on the spot, they would still be harshly remembered by others behind their backs, causing people to feel uneasy. How many loyal subjects and generals would follow such a lord to the death? Therefore, Suko was moved by Jiang Pingji's ability to admit that she had her shortcomings so easily. Suko was secretly touched, but Jiang Pingji couldn't touch his cute point at all. At that moment, Meng Han had already settled the rest of his brothers. His face was full of joy. He went to take a look. It was a dry and tidy shared bed. Every bedding was good and warm. He didn't feel the slightest bit cold. Meng Han was very satisfied with this treatment. There weren't many tenant farmers in the farm, so most of the rooms were empty. Occasionally, they would store some things, tidy up a little, and smoke out the humidity in the room. Basically, it was ready for people to live in. Suku had considered the situation of adding more people to the troop, so he had prepared an extra room, which was just in time to be put to use. As for Meng Han, his residence had already been arranged by the farm's maidservant, so he should have a place to stay at night. Thank you, Lang Jun. Meng Han bowed to Jiang Pingji as soon as he arrived, but she stopped him before he could kneel down. That's how it should be. Since you've chosen me, I'll at least guarantee you the most basic necessities. Jiang Pingji said calmly and gestured for Meng Han to sit down. You can ask Xiaoyu about the handover of the troops. I will come to the farm occasionally. If there's any shortage, just let me know. In a few days, the situation will be more tense. Remember to be careful. Meng Han understood what Jiang Pingji meant. If the Mengs knew that Meng Liang had been kidnapped, they would be furious. By the way, after I go back, I will send my personal maid to you, Jiang Pingji suddenly said. Suku, who was enjoying his tea, almost choked when he heard what Jiang Pingji said. Meng Han didn't know what to do. His face turned red and white, and he stuttered, Lang Jun, I appreciate your kindness. But my late wife's mourning period is not over yet, so I really can't accept you. Plus, I don't want to remarry." Jiang Pingji was confused. She looked at Meng Hun and then at Su Ku. Then she raised her eyebrows and complained, "Why are you so dirty? What kind of dirty things are you thinking about?" The two of them didn't understand what dirty was. Su Ku, who was conveniently insulted by Jiang Pingji, also felt wronged. What was wrong with him? Before they could say anything, Jiang Pingji explained, "My maid is here to practice martial arts." "What else are you thinking?" Meng Hun and Su Ku were stunned, and then they quietly lowered their heads. Su Ku was fine. He knew that his Lang Jun was not a decent person. But Meng Hun reflected on himself. He had forgotten that his Lang Jun was only 12. According to the rules of the aristocratic families, he didn't even have a room. Meng Hun was a special case of sleeping with women at the age of 11. He couldn't be compared to the other noble sons of the aristocratic families. He thought that his little Lang Jun probably didn't know how misleading his words were. There was a subtle awkwardness between the two of them. Meng Hun coughed awkwardly. He couldn't say that he misunderstood that his Lang Jun wanted to give him his maid. But that didn't make sense. Why would he send his maid to the farm to practice martial arts with the troops? Jiang Pingji had her own plans. She didn't have much time to teach Nongqin. Or rather, she didn't have the patience to teach. She could let Nongqin learn some basic physical training from the troops. Meng Hun was a reliable person. With him watching over her, Nongqin wouldn't be taken advantage of. Jiang Pingji would give Nongqin special training from time to time. Soon, she would be able to beat those weak warriors in the troops. Whoever wanted to take advantage of her had to be prepared to be kicked in the balls. "My maid likes knives, spears, swords, and halberds. It's too boring to be trapped in the inner house all day. I think it's good for her to practice martial arts if she likes it. She won't be bullied by her husband when she gets married," Jiang Pingji said seriously. "What do you think?" Meng Hun and Su Ku were confused. What could they say? Lang Jun cared about his maidservant and was afraid that she would be bullied when she got married. A normal person would ask someone to instill the correct concept of being a good wife and educating children for the maidservant and let her study women's morality and needlework instead of asking her to practice martial arts. What was he thinking? If there was a conflict in the family, he could solve it with his fists. Su Ku looked like he had opened a door to a new world. Meng Hun said, "Lang Jun's idea is great. He was also a man with a daughter who was brutally murdered. If she could grow up safely, it would be time for him to get married in a few years." As a father, of course, he couldn't bear to see his daughter being bullied. So, even though Lang Jun's idea was a bit strange, he still supported it. Su Ku looked at Meng Hun in shock. He felt like he had been rejected by the two. But Su Ku twisted his body uneasily and said, "This is not a good idea. After all, the troops are all men. What should we do if the reputation of Lang Jun's maid is ruined?" Jiang Pingji didn't say anything. Meng Hun said with a stern face, "In the previous dynasty, there were also female generals. Why can't women practice martial arts?" Su Ku was speechless. Chapter 184. Although that was what Meng Hun said, he still felt uneasy. He felt that something bad would happen. According to his understanding, the personal maids of the noble sons of the aristocratic families would either get married when they were of age, or they would directly become servants in the house. It was extremely rare to see someone like Jiang Pingji, who directly threw her out to practice martial arts. Perhaps it was the only one. Lang Jun was still young and didn't know much about romance, so he didn't mind letting the maid learn martial arts. What if she grew up and regretted it? Meng Hun hesitated to express his concern, but he found out that Lang Jun was not ignorant at all. Not only did he understand, but he was also shrewd. His thoughts were different from other men, and he was more broad-minded. Don't worry. I plan to let the maid learn martial arts. You don't have to be so nervous. Jiang Pingji shook her head and began to put on a bluffing air. It was difficult for the people of this era to understand her thoughts and persistence, so she planned to use a way that the people of this era could understand to explain her thoughts. Moreover, her fallacious reasoning could convince people. She said, I often read the books of the predecessors and read the history books. I found a very interesting phenomenon. Su Ke was interested when she mentioned the history books. He asked, Lang Jun, what did you find? Jiang Pingji said, most women were vassals or even goods that could be bought and sold. This phenomenon was especially serious before the chaos of the 16 kingdoms. The emperor of a country had as many as 33,000 concubines and maids. Although it was an exaggeration, it showed how extravagant the emperor was at that time. On the other hand, men could not marry. In some places, brothers, uncles and nephews even shared wives. It became a custom. Su Ke nodded. The books he read were all from the study of the Lus, so he had naturally read the content. Later, the last emperor favored the villains. He was extravagant and drained the national treasury. The 16 vassal kings occupied land and proclaimed themselves emperors. That was the beginning of the chaos of the 16 kingdoms for hundreds of years. At that time, women were robbed. During the famine, they even ate them. Su Ke had also read about this history. At that time, he felt that the era of the 16 kingdoms was too bloody and dark. The central plains were empty, and the population was less than a tenth of what it had been before the 16 kingdoms. It was so ignorant and bloody that it made one's blood boil. The poison caused by the 16 kingdoms did not return to the previous population level until decades after the founding of the Xia kingdom. Most of those famous female generals appear at this time. Jiang Pingji said, is there value only in giving birth to children, contributing to the population, or becoming food for others? But I see something different. Su Ke shook his head and denied, of course not. Women have contributed a lot to the increase of the population, is that all? Jiang Pingji continued, the 16 kingdoms were established one after another. In the 6th year, bandits burned, killed, and looted in Yushin County. Nuwa Changpu used a stratagem to kill the leader of the bandits and gather the remaining bandits, protecting the peace of the area. Her only value was to give birth. Su Ke thought for a moment and shook his head. According to the records, Changpu is a natural stone maiden and cannot bear children. However, she has a husband and they love each other very much. There's a strange record in the Xia kingdom. There was a strange phenomenon of a golden phoenix descending to the ground in the sky of Mei County. At the same time, a baby girl was born. Everyone said that the baby girl had the name of the golden phoenix and could be the mother of the country. Xiaoyu, do you still remember the content of this record? Jiang Pingji asked again. What she said was all true history. Anyone with a bit of knowledge would understand. Lang Jun, you must be talking about one of the meritorious deeds in the founding of the Xia kingdom. She was as famous as Master Meng, and she was later bestowed the title of Marquis Su. Then, Jiang Pingji mentioned a few other famous women in the 16 kingdoms or in the early days of the Xia kingdom. Finally, she said, from this, it can be seen that women can also create meritorious deeds that are not inferior to men. So why is the position of women getting closer and closer to that of the 16 kingdoms? I heard from the merchants that Zhongzhou is now promoting a book called Women's Precepts. There are 7 chapters in it, including inferiority, husband and wife, respect and prudence, women's conduct, concentration, obedience, and uncle and sister. The content is quite interesting. Xiaoyu, you can read it. Su Ke was speechless. Women's precepts. It sounded like it was read by women. Why should he read it? I bought a copy of Women's Precepts from a merchant. When I finished reading it, there was only one thought in my mind: which idiot wrote this? Jiang Pingji sneered and said, after careful investigation, it turned out that it was written by the Empress of Zhongzhou with the intention of enlightening the women of the world. There were even Confucian scholars who wrote that Master Su's behavior was immoral and hoped that the title of Marquis Su would be revoked. When Su Ke heard that, he almost exploded. He said, "What a pedantic scholar. How dare he do that? Master Su's bravery is no less than Master Meng of Zhangzhou. If it weren't for the fact that Master Su has few children and doesn't like disputes in the court, the Mengs of Zhangzhou wouldn't be so arrogant today." Meng Hun's old boss was the Mengs. He was a little embarrassed when he heard that. Master Meng and Master Su were known as the two heroes of the army in those days. They were later part of the 5 generals. However, Master Meng loved wine. He drank during a march and almost got into trouble. In the end, it was Master Su who led the army to rescue them and prevented any losses. Therefore, the person who was most displeased with the Mengs was Master Su, who was given the posthumous title of Marquis Su. The posthumous title should have been given to him when he was alive, but Emperor Xia delayed it until he passed away because of the atmosphere in the court and Meng Jing's reputation. But in Zhongzhou, there are many scholars who approve of this news. Jiang Pingji smiled with a touch of cynicism. What does this mean? She is a founding member of the country. Because of her identity as a woman, she fought in battles all her life and made countless contributions. She couldn't be conferred the title of Marquis when she was alive, and the posthumous title was taken away by her descendants after her death. With the current atmosphere, are we moving forward and becoming more open-minded, or are we moving closer to the end of the dynasty before the 16 kingdoms? Su Ke calmed himself down. Thinking about it carefully, it seemed to be the case all these years. Even Dongqing, which was quite open-minded, had gradually become reserved. Was this a kind of progress or a kind of regression? Su Ke asked, "So, what do you mean?" "Nongqing's arrangement is my intention," Jiang Pingji said. After the establishment of the Xia dynasty, the people's livelihood and population have indeed recovered a lot. However, after the 5 kingdoms divided into Xia, there were constant conflicts between the kingdoms. The population that had just started to improve showed signs of withering again. It was already like this, yet the Queen of Zhongzhou still came up with the so-called women's precepts, which required women to be faithful to one man and not marry a second husband. It would be a miracle if the population increased, but the people of Zhongzhou were also brainless. They actually thought that it was very reasonable. Later on, they asked the women and their families to study the women's precepts written by the queen. Had their brains been digested into sh*t? Wasn't the correct way to cultivate the people's health, encourage farming, urge men and women to marry, and issue appropriate laws to support it? If this kind of brain could become the emperor, the F***king system still wanted her to fight in the palace to win the favor of this kind of person. She must be brainless. The innocent system. Chapter 185. Su Ke sighed. Dongqing also had a post-war recovery law, but some aristocratic families exploited and obstructed it, so it could not be implemented. Now, there were still conflicts between the countries. The southern man and the northern borderline were eyeing each other covetously. The war was almost on the verge of breaking out. All the knowledgeable people in the world had a consensus that the world was going to be in chaos again after a few years of stability. Thinking about the history of the 16 countries, and looking at the 5 countries that were not giving in to each other, Su Ke felt more and more helpless. People were like duckweed, drifting without anyone to rely on. The clear voice of the young man continued to ring in his ears, as if it had a strange charm that calmed people's hearts and souls. Young strong men died on the battlefield. If the remaining women don't have the ability to protect themselves, they will be taken back by the northern borderline and the southern man and suffer all kinds of humiliation. If they don't have children continuously, they will be treated as two-legged sheep by the livestock and be killed when they are hungry. Lang Jun, you mean, although Su Ku was a man, he had longed for those extraordinary women in the previous dynasty for a long time and admired them wholeheartedly. Because of his admiration, it even affected his choice of future wife. His mother also had a great influence on him. She was a strong woman. Even if she lost her husband at a young age, she could still grit her teeth and raise Su Ku. She taught him how to be a man and provided for him to study. She was like the most common weed that would not be easily subdued despite the wind and rain and trampled on by pedestrians. He didn't dare to imagine that if he married a weak and graceful woman, who was docile and beautiful, who also cried in the wind and screamed when she saw snakes, insects, rats, and ants. Then, when something happened to him, who would his wife and children rely on? Who else could they rely on? It was precisely because of this that Su Ku agreed with what Jiang Pingji said, even if it was a little off the mark. Su Ku vaguely understood and felt that this person really had the look of a wise ruler. However, he soon found out that it was all a lie. Women can also make such achievements. Why do they have to be tied up like canaries? Their wings can't fly and they can only be used as decorations. Other than being admired, being a part of your wealth, giving birth to children, supporting your husband and children, there's no other value. Meng Hun did not interrupt, but he also shook his head in denial. Everyone had a daughter. If they gave birth to a daughter and raised her painstakingly, only to have her become a servant to another man, who could bear it? Meng Hun said, as a father, I naturally don't like my own flesh and blood being treated so lowly. Su Ku was still a fledgling, but when he imagined his future, he found it hard to accept. A husband and a father were two completely different identities. Naturally, their perspectives were different. I don't think that's the point. The point is, it's such a waste of manpower and resources. Not only did they cripple him, but they also wasted his excellent combat strength. Women had the same battle prowess as men, so why did men have to go to war while women stayed at home? Why don't we go together? Su Ku and Meng Hun were speechless. They were dumbfounded. This was different from the usual way of stirring up love. So, from the beginning to the end, she had said so much, laid so much groundwork, just to say that women should stay at home and not go to the battlefield to waste their strength. This was the real deal, using women as men, right? Meng Hun coughed and tried to say something to ease the awkward atmosphere. Lang Jun is still young. There are many things you don't understand. He smiled. Su Ku immediately understood and turned her head away, unable to bear to look at him. Tell me, what do I not understand? Jiang Pingji felt that if they did not follow her script, she would be very embarrassed. Women, the reason why there are more women in the inner courtyard is that they, are born different from men. Meng Hun said vaguely. How could he explain to his little Lang Jun that women's physiology was different from men's? After their bodies matured, they would need kuei water every month, and their bodies would become delicate. Pregnancy would take more than 9 months, and they would not be able to work normally. Even giving birth would be like walking through the gates of hell. Lang Jun was still young and inexperienced. Even if he explained it to him, he might not understand. That was a bit embarrassing. Meng Hun glanced at Su Ku. You are a scholar after all, so you should say something. Unfortunately, Su Ku was already looking at the sky and the earth, and he refused to look at his pleading eyes. Jiang Pingji was speechless. The two men thought that Jiang Pingji did not understand, but in fact, she already knew what they were trying to express through their mysterious eye contact. Because of the physiological structure, men were destined to be external, while women were internal. With the development of society, the social status of the latter would get lower and lower. If these words were said to people in ancient times, it would indeed be the case. But it did not make sense in front of Jiang Pingji. There is nothing in this world that is impossible. Jiang Pingji curled her lips mysteriously and said that out of the blue. Su Ke and Meng Hun stopped eye contact and looked at her. They did not know what she meant. Jiang Pingji obviously did not want to explain. We are going off topic. Anyway, Nongqin will be training with the troops in the farm. As for training tasks, you don't have to deliberately give her preferential treatment, and you don't have to relax the standards. Just do what you need to do. When the training is almost done, I will make other arrangements. Jiang Pingji didn't believe that they would lose to a group of weak fighters. She taught them with special attention. Meng Hun nodded, but he still wanted to protect her a little bit. After all, girls were different from rough men. That is not a problem. It is also a good thing that Lang Jun's maidservant wants to learn martial arts. At least she can protect Lang Jun. But they are rough people, and sometimes their mouths are not clean. If they are wronged. Meng Hun did not dare to say that he could completely avoid it. Jiang Pingji said indifferently, "It's okay. If someone says something dirty, Nongqin will just break a few of their teeth. If they could fight, they would use their fists to reason." Meng Hun was speechless. If his subordinates had such violent thoughts, Meng Hun would definitely say something. But the one who said it was Lang Jun, so he, up to you, up to you, up to you. After Meng Hun left to prepare, Su Ke suddenly thought of something and asked her a question. Lang Jun, you want women to go to the battlefield just because you think it is a waste of combat power. He deliberately emphasized the word just. Jiang Pingji suddenly smiled slyly and said, "Xiaoyu knows me well." Su Ke was speechless. He suddenly did not want to listen to what Jiang Pingji had to say next. He was afraid that it would shock him. But it was too late. The world values boys more than girls. Many families abandon their daughters and let them be taken away by wolves and tigers. Even if the children grow up, most of them are treated harshly. If the men in the family need money to get married or build a house, most of them will sell the girls cheaply. Su Ke felt that he did not need to listen anymore. Jiang Pingji wanted him to hear it. With the same amount of silver, one strong man can buy 2 girls and even have extra. Most importantly, it was cheap. She could build 2 troops with the same amount of silver. Su Ke was speechless. Just as he expected. Chapter 186. These are all written by Lang Jun. I didn't expect Lang Jun to be so knowledgeable about troop training. Meng Hun held the training rules written by Jiang Pingji like a treasure. Su Ke was not used to Meng Hun's expression of admiration, so he gave him the original draft that Jiang Pingji had written before. The training content could be called Torture by Su Ke. Naturally, it was inhumane. Meng Hun glanced at it and put it down quietly. He would rather read the revised version. "Coach Meng, if there's anything you don't understand, you can come to me at any time." Meng Hun was a tactful person. Su Ke handed over the work easily, so the mental preparation he had done before was not put to use. "Of course. I'll have to trouble Xiaoyu when the time comes." Meng Hun cupped his hands and smiled. He liked Su Ke a little more. Civil and military were 2 different fields. As a scholar, Su Ke was not familiar with training, but he was very meticulous in his work. Even though Meng Hun had never been in contact with this fledgling troop before, he had a rough idea after reading the content that Su Ke gave him. They were in the same camp, but they were not familiar with each other, so they did not talk about anything other than work. Suko was young, but he was talented and had a high level of comprehension. He learned a lot from Meng Hun's conversation. He was good at internal affairs, so he specialized in that area. He was very interested in the wartime food transportation that Meng Hun mentioned. As the saying goes, before the troops move, the food and fodder move first. A good logistics transportation line could decide the outcome of a war. His Longjuan's ambition was not limited to that. As the first member of Jiang Pingji's team, Su Ke could not lock his position as an accountant in the Lus. In other words, Su Ke had his own ambitions. They weren't small. At least, he wasn't just an accountant. Meng Hun did not hide anything since Su Ke was asking about it. He told him everything he knew and even the names of several books. As for how to find those books, it was not Meng Hun's concern. Of course, Meng Hun did not read as many books as Su Ke. He had the advantage of age and his own experience, which was valuable. Unknowingly, the two of them chatted until night fell. After a hasty dinner, they went back to work. Jiang Pingji went back to the Lus and took out her night clothes. Then she put the two books in a secret place in the woodshed. That's good, she smiled. Everything was under control, which made her mood improve a lot. Her figure quickly disappeared into the night. That night, the gambling house was still very noisy. The gamblers did not care about the loss. They only cared about their own money and the money in other people's pockets. The boss of the gambling house was so angry that he almost vomited blood after Jiang Pingji cheated him of more than 4,000 taels of silver. Later on, he received news that the beautiful woman in the woodshed had been kidnapped by an unknown person. The hired thugs who were on duty at the gambling house had been seriously injured. When the old man heard this, he almost couldn't breathe. However, he had a tough life and was still alive. Even though he had suffered 2 critical hits, the boss would not close down because of this. This business, of course, had to continue. This casino was his property in Hejian County. If it was closed, how much silver would he lose in a day? The boss's face was ashen as he swallowed the blood and broken teeth. He hired a doctor to treat the injured thugs and bought some medicine. After giving them a small sum of money, he sent them home to recuperate. The security of the casino was temporarily handed over to the thugs who were not on duty that day. Big. 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 Small. 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 This time, it must be small. Voices rose and fell one after another, filling the lobby on the first floor of the gambling house. The banker was smiling on the surface, but he was nervous on the inside. He opened the dice cup. 3 sixes. It was still a leopard. The dealer was a killer. At that moment, many gamblers who had lost their mind started to complain that there was a shady deal going on in the gambling house. Why is it a leopard again? This is the 3rd leopard tonight, right? I have lost 20 taels since I came in. The last one was 3. 1 and now it's 3. 6. Who would believe that there is no shady deal? That's right. The money I earned from selling 2 acres of land has been taken away. Faced with the ruckus of the gamblers, the banker sneered coldly in his heart. A bunch of fools. The gambling house was a place where gamblers were emptying their pockets. How could there be no shady deal going on? How could the dealer have won so many times without any shady deal? Weren't they stupid? The dealer saw that the gamblers were getting out of control. Some thugs came forward with sticks and threatened them. The hot-headed gamblers became as obedient as a quail. How could an ordinary person beat a thug with a thick stick with his bare hands? The dealer said calmly, "If you are unlucky, go pray to the god of fortune. If you lose, it's your bad luck. Don't blame the gambling house. What kind of place do you think the gambling house is? If you win, you lose. If you don't win, you have to be arrogant, right? In fact, the dealer was also in a dilemma. He had lost too much money, and no one was making money. Even the stupidest gamblers would be vigilant. But what could he do? The gambling house had been cheated of so much money. The boss naturally continued to exploit the gamblers. In the past, he only occasionally pulled wool. Now, he planned to shave all the wool off the fat sheep. If you want to gamble, go. If not, get lost. The dealer waved his hand in annoyance. The gamblers looked at each other. In the end, no one left. They continued to hold on to the idea that they could make a comeback in the next round and earn back the money they had lost. They continued to indulge in this cruel trap. The dealer saw that they had surrounded the gambling table again. He snorted coldly in his heart. Despicable. The gambling house was still noisy and lively. The roars were mixed with the ecstasy of making money. It continued until dawn. Early in the morning, the leaves of grass were covered with mist. The city gates had not opened. Many people had gathered outside the city. Many of them had brought the vegetables they had harvested from their fields. With a creak, the city gates opened. The people began to line up and enter the city one by one. Thump thump thump. The crisp sound of horse hooves came from afar. The people at the end of the line were carefully counting the eggs in their baskets. These were laid by their big hen. They had saved up for a few days to gather these few catties. They were waiting to sell them at a good price at the market to subsidize their family. Get out of the way. The people had already moved aside when they heard the horse hooves. However, they did not expect the other party to be so arrogant. They did not stop at all. Ah! Help! My eggs, who stepped on me? It hurts, ouch! Chapter 187. Those who were lucky enough to escape fell to the ground, while the unlucky ones were trampled by the hooves of the horses. Immediately, a middle-aged woman was trampled on the left side of her chest. After the sound of bones breaking, her chest caved in. Blood flowed from her mouth, and she died. The guards at the gate noticed the commotion and stepped forward to stop it. The 20 or 30 strong men on horseback took out a token from their waists. Who dares to stop the Mangs? Let them in. Hey, they were so stubborn. The guards had seen arrogant people, but they had never seen anyone who dared to kill people on horseback and still dared to announce their family name. Even if they were from the aristocratic families, they still cared about their face. How could they be so arrogant and rude? Stop them. Stop them all. The head of the guards was unhappy. This kind of thing had happened so early in the morning, and several lives had been lost. If he let the murderer go just like that, he would be charged with a crime, and he would not be able to keep his position. I have never heard of anyone with the surname Mang in Hejin County. Arrest them. However, before the guards got close, the one who had trampled people to death on horseback blinded the guard with a whip. I am from the Mangs in Meng County, Zhangzhou. How dare you? The Mangs. The Mangs, one of the 4 noble families in Dongqing and the real emperor of Zhangzhou. The leader of the guard's expression changed several times. Finally, he forced a smile. Oh, I understand. May I know the reason why you have come? Breaking into the gate and trampling people to death. Did they really think that Hejin County was the same as Meng County in Zhangzhou? Cut the crap and let us into the city. Otherwise, we will kill you. The whip in his hand cracked in the air, forcing the leader of the guards to take a step back. Just like that, the group of people casually rode their horses away. Above the gate, the soldiers had already drawn their bows and arrows, waiting for the order to shoot. The leader of the guards was livid. He raised his hand to stop them. If they were really from the Mangs, they would be in trouble if they hurt them. If they were not from the Mangs, they wouldn't dare to be so arrogant in Hejin County. However, they still had to send someone to follow them. Who knew what they were up to? Facing the people lying in pools of blood and hearing the moaning and groaning in his ears, the leader clenched his fists and punched the city wall in anger. Report this matter to the prefectural governor, then send the injured to the medical center. Record everyone's loss and those who died tragically. Send these to the prefectural governor and let him decide. The Meng family of Zhangzhou, they've gone too far. Early in the morning, there were already wails and cries outside the city gate. Back to the other side. After the group entered the city, they immediately galloped on the streets. Fortunately, the market had not opened yet and there were not many pedestrians, so it was easy to avoid them. Do you know where the Fulai Casino is? The leader stopped his horse in front of a passerby who obviously hadn't slept all night. The horse's hooves were raised high and almost fell on the man. The man was so scared that he was no longer sleepy. He felt as if he had taken a stroll through the gates of hell. His back was drenched in cold sweat. No. Under the threat of the horse's hooves, the passerby was so scared that he fell to the ground. The passerby was the gambler who had gambled all night in the Fulai Casino. His eyes were bloodshot, his face was pale, his lips were pale, and his eyes were heavy. From afar, he looked like he was walking on air. You know. Good that you know. Take us there quickly, or you'll be whipped. The leader was overjoyed, and the dozens of strong men behind him also revealed relaxed expressions. They didn't expect to be so lucky that they caught a person just after they entered the city gate, and he happened to know the Fulai Casino. Thinking of Meng Liang, who had been missing for a long time, they couldn't help but feel nervous. They didn't want to escort him to Shangjing to hide. After all, Meng Liang's bad temper was well known. He was also a little lecher. Anyone who was targeted by him, no matter male or female, no matter how good-looking they were, could escape from his claws. The lucky ones survived, and the unlucky ones were beaten to death directly. Thinking that the family head, Meng Zhan, wanted him to be the heir of the family, many elders in the family felt a little disappointed. The Mengs was so glorious. If it was handed over to a playboy like Meng Liang, wouldn't it be over? How could he support a family with his little ability? In contrast, the eldest Lang Jun, who had no sense of existence, was more popular. Unfortunately, he was far away in Shangjing to study, and he wouldn't come back even once a year. He had almost no contact with the Meng subordinates, and he didn't even write a letter to his family. Thinking of this, people could understand. Meng Liang had a son who didn't even have a son. How could he be more likable than Meng Liang, who was sweet and filial? However, it was strange that they were both sons of the same mother. The second Lang Jun, Meng Liang, was useless, while the eldest Lang Jun, Meng Heng, was educated and polite. It was said that he was quite famous in Shangjing. He was going to be evaluated this year, and it was estimated that he would get a good result. Putting away the unnecessary thoughts, the leader threatened the gambler to lead the way. The gambler had no choice but to lead the way in fear. The knife on the man's waist was real, and the whip in his hand was still dripping with blood. He didn't want to die. Is this the place? After several turns, the group stopped in front of a gambling house. Standing outside, they could hear the clamor inside the house. Yes, yes. There is only one gambling house here called Fulai. Well, sir, can I go now? If he led the way for others, he could get some tips if he was lucky. But he was leading the way for this man, and it was good enough that he didn't lose his life. The gambler bowed. After getting permission from the leader, he quickly turned around and ran away as if he was being chased by evil spirits. Bah, coward! Behind him, a few of the attendants on horseback laughed, mocking the gambler's horrified expression and actions just now. Shut up. It's more important to find Lang Jun. The leader scolded in a low voice, got off the horse, opened the curtain, and entered the gambling house with his knife. There were about 20 or 30 people in the gambling house, all with knives. They were tall and burly, and had a strong aura. They seemed to be evil. As soon as they entered the hall of the gambling house, the whole space became narrower than before. The sharp-eyed waiter of the gambling house saw them, and his heart skipped a beat. Judging from their clothes and aura, they didn't look like they were here for fun. Could it be that they were in trouble? Thinking of this, the waiter had cold sweat on his back. He forced a smile and went forward to welcome the guests. Don't talk nonsense. Let me ask you, did you catch a young boy 2 days ago? The waiter's expression froze, and his forehead began to sweat. Chapter 188. Don't play tricks with me. Speak. Did you catch a very good-looking young boy here? The leader was experienced and knowledgeable. How could the waiter's thoughts escape his eyes? He immediately brandished his whip to demonstrate his power. With a loud crack, the sturdy gambling table broke into pieces. The gambler who could not dodge in time was whipped. In the next second, a frightening line of blood seeped through his clothes, scaring everyone away. There was only a broken gambling table left on the ground, and a gambler who was holding his waist, blood oozing out from between his fingers. If you don't tell the truth, I'll let you all have a taste of being whipped later. Let me ask you one more time. Did your gambling house capture a very good-looking young man a few days ago? Speak, did you catch him? The whip in the man's hand was extremely thick, about the thickness of 2 fingers of an adult. There were many fine and dense barbs on the long black whip. The tail of the whip was strung with more than 20 thin blades. With this kind of whip, it did not require much strength to whip someone until they bled profusely. If one used more strength, they might not even be able to withstand a single whip and directly die. The waiter was relatively close to the leader, so he could clearly see the blood dripping from the barbs on the whip. He was immediately scared out of his wits. This little one. The waiter originally wanted to be stubborn, but when his eyes met with the leader's, a kind of illusion of death assaulted him, as if his neck was being strangled by an invisible force, causing him to be unable to say the rest of the words. The other gamblers did not know what had happened, but they knew that the gambling house was probably in big trouble. They wanted to sneak away, but the leader's entourage blocked the door, looking as if they would not let him go until they got an answer. The waiter was unwilling to speak, but the other gamblers felt pity for their lives, so they naturally opened their mouths. 2 days ago, we did catch such a young boy. I heard that the boy is extremely beautiful as a fairy. His skin is exquisite, and his taste is also. The gambler was the first to speak, but before he could finish his words, he was already covered by the person beside him. The entire lobby was silent. Everyone could feel an invisible chilling atmosphere enveloping the entire place. Those gamblers were all ordinary people, and their bodies were even weaker than ordinary people. When had they ever faced such a murderous aura? He was so scared that his legs started to tremble. His knees went soft and he knelt on the ground with a plop. He didn't feel any pain in his knees at all. What they didn't know was that the leader and his followers were also extremely shocked at this moment. They were so shocked that they forgot how to react. They were all adult men who had experienced sex and played with women before. Perhaps some of them had even played with men before. As for what the gambler had described, they knew very well in their hearts what kind of scene would happen. At this moment, there was only one thought in everyone's mind: it's over. It was indeed over. Who was Meng Liang? The Zongzi that Meng Zhan favored, the future leader of the Meng family, was now in a gambling house. It was so embarrassing. The leader's expression was incomparably gloomy, even turning ashen. He didn't dare to think about the storm they would have to face after rescuing Meng Liang. The waiter also wanted to cry but had no tears. He had already realized that the kid he had caught earlier really had a powerful background. Now that they had come to ask for Meng Liang, it was obvious that he was a tough guy. How could a small gambling house resist them? The waiter said shakily, He really isn't here. He was released a long time ago. How could the leader believe that? He would rather believe that these people had evil thoughts about Meng Liang and locked him up in a small dark room. He waved his hand, and the 20 to 30 followers he had brought with him guarded all the entrances and exits of the gambling house, not allowing anyone to escape. Search. The order was given, and the demolition. No, the search began. The leader was like a stone pillar, standing where he was. He crossed his arms in front of his chest, and his resolute face was solemn. The waiter wanted to cry but had no tears. The other thugs received the news and wanted to come up with wooden sticks. One of the followers pulled out a knife from his waist. Blood splashed, staining the gambling table and the scattered silver and gambling equipment. Everyone watched as the thug's arm was chopped off, and then the knife pierced through his chest. He fell to the ground with his eyes wide open in horror. Someone was dead. Blood quickly spread and filled the entire hole. The timid gamblers covered their mouths and vomited. The brave ones also turned pale, like a white wall covered with a layer of lime. Although the thugs in the gambling house were used to doing heartless things, they still knew fear. They only dared to seriously injure people, but they didn't dare to kill them. However, none of them expected that there was no lack of people like this in this world. The knives on their waists were all genuine and could take a person's life. The wait was especially long. One by one, the followers came up with a pale face, but none of them could find Meng Liang. Sir, our restaurant was indeed blind and caught that young man, but, that very night, that young man had already been rescued. The waiter was trembling with fear, and his 2 skinny legs couldn't stop trembling. He didn't dare to tell the truth. If he told the truth and said that the young man disappeared on the second night after being caught, it would undoubtedly confirm the truth that the big mouth of the gambler had revealed. Could any aristocratic family endure such humiliation? If that happened, they would really be finished. Therefore, there were some things that they couldn't admit even if they were beaten to death. After a while, the followers came back one after another. The news was very disappointing. The last one was holding 2 scrolls in his hands. The scrolls were stained with dust. These 2 scrolls were found in a woodshed. Found this. Boss, please take a look. He had interrogated 2 of the thugs and confirmed that the woodshed was where the gambling house kept the goods. Because he didn't dare to make a decision, he didn't open the scrolls to see the contents. The leader reached out his hand and roughly tore the neatly tied strips of cloth on the bamboo scrolls. He shook it open with one hand. He read 10 lines at a time. After he finished reading, the leader's face suddenly became darker and darker, as if ink was about to drip out. Everyone was trembling, afraid that it would say that Meng Liang was already dead. Of course, there was no such content, but it wasn't optimistic either. These people. Kill them all. The leader's eyes flashed, and his murderous aura was obvious. After receiving the order, the other followers didn't hesitate. They all pulled out the knives on their waists and walked to the others. What were these people going to do? Whether it was the people in the gambling house or the gamblers, they were all scared out of their wits. Murder. One of the gamblers couldn't help it anymore. He wanted to run out the door, but his head was instantly cut off from his body. Blood splashed on the wall. At that moment, everyone clearly realized one thing. Chapter 189. What's going on? Jiang Pingji had just finished her breakfast. She meditated for a while and then turned on the streaming room. She greeted the audience as usual. On the way to the study room, she saw two servants whispering to each other by the rockery. One of them was crying and looked very sad. Her five senses were very good, but they were also troublesome. To deal with this flaw, Jiang Pingji would usually suppress her five senses to keep them at half the level of ordinary people. She was a bit far away, so she only heard some words like city gate, someone died, and someone was injured. The servants were all panicked when they saw Jiang Pingji. It was still working time, so how could they not be flustered when they were caught slacking? The Lu's had its own rules and regulations. After County Chief Lu came back, he became more strict and did not allow anyone to slack off. Don't be so flustered. Tell me, what happened at the city gate? Jiang Pingji faced the middle-aged woman who had been crying secretly. I'm not an unreasonable person. I won't blame you if you have a reason for chatting. The middle-aged woman grabbed her sleeves nervously and said sadly, this morning, my mother and father entered the city together. We didn't expect a group of strong men who claimed to be from the Mangs of Zhangzhou to break in. They rode their horses and injured people. My father tried to protect my mother and one of his legs was trampled by a horse. Jiang Pingji's face turned serious, and the audience in the streaming room expressed their shock. Mingyue Tianya, oh my god, did I hear it wrong? Armstrong, why do I feel that all the people and things that the streamer has been in contact with recently are related to the Mangs? Ye Qingzhou, the Mangs are too arrogant. They even dared to break into the city gate. Do they want to die? Since your father was injured, I guess you must be anxious now and have no mood to work. Go to the cashier and get an extra month's salary to buy some nourishing tonics for your father. He is old and will not recover as quickly as young people. The servant heard that and suddenly burst into tears. She thanked Jiang Pingji repeatedly. After she left, Jiang Pingji looked at another servant who came to deliver a message. Her eyes turned cold. Come here and tell me what happened at the city gate this morning. Be as specific as possible. Jiang Pingji had expected Meng Liang's entourage to come, but she didn't expect them to come so quickly and so arrogantly. They even let their horses hurt people, and it seemed like they even killed them. It was a servant woman who came to deliver the news. She was a servant of the Lu residence, but she didn't live in the Lu residence. She usually worked in a secluded area in the outer yard and was very idle. After she was done with her own work, she still had time to gossip about the rumors in the marketplace. She could be considered the gossip center of the entire Lu residence. Although she wasn't present, as a gossip girl, her storytelling skills were quite good. She narrated it vividly. Are you sure someone died? Jiang Pingji asked. Her eyes flashed with a hint of murderous intent. Her impression of the Mangs dropped by half. The servant woman gestured with her hands and said, that's right. There were more than a few who were trampled to death by the horses' hooves. There was also a beautiful girl who was of marriageable age and followed her mother into the city to buy some red hair ropes. Who would have thought that this would happen? Everyone says that the man surnamed Meng is the local tyrant of Zhangzhou. He can't even control the current officials. Now that I see it, it's true. Jiang Pingji glared at her coldly and said, how dare you say something like that? Don't take your life. The maidservant came back to her senses and immediately broke out in a cold sweat. She quickly bent down and begged for mercy. It's good that you have a long memory. Trouble comes from the mouth. It doesn't matter if you die or not, but don't drag the entire Lu residence into it. Jiang Pingji waved her hand and gestured for her to leave. Since there's a reason for this, I won't make trouble for you this time. Don't leave your post without permission in the future. The bullet screen in the Livestream room flashed past her eyes one after another. Some of them were like, ha ha ha, while others were like, lol. Raising a chestnut, the host's behavior is typical. Only the officials are allowed to set fires, but the common people are not allowed to light lamps. I remember that she named the royal family of Dongqing by name. When the servant said so, she scolded her with a straight face, hoping that the maidservant would be traumatized. Raising a chestnut, if not, how can she be a match for the domineering host? Raising two chestnuts, the only host who is domineering and capricious but still not pleasing to the eye. Tang roasted chestnut, no. Now isn't the point that the Mengs are arrogant? They broke the city gate with horses and killed people? Obviously, there were viewers who were willing to understand the plot of the live stream, but only a few. Most of them were there to watch the host. The Mengs, Jiang Pingji could imagine the bloody chaos at the city gate in the early morning just by simulating it in her mind. In the future, the first ones to be destroyed will be the Mengs. She suddenly opened her eyes, turned around, and left the Lu residence. She got on the carriage and asked the groom to drive her to Fulai gambling house. Before he could even get close, the stench of blood had already entered his nose. Everyone's blood was slightly different. People with a keen sense of smell could even distinguish a lot of information by smell, such as how many people had died and how long they had been dead. That was her level in her previous life. In this life, she had only fused a little, so she was not that good. However, based on her rich experience, the number of people who had died was definitely not less than 50. Jiang Pingji's face turned cold. She said to the groom, "Go a little further and see what happened." The coachman drove the carriage forward a little. A group of people surrounded the entrance of the gambling house. One by one, people dressed in bailiffs' uniforms carried out the corpses covered with white cloth. The blood had yet to coagulate, and it dripped onto the ground. Everyone's faces turned pale when they saw it. They were all killed. Jiang Pingji clenched her fists. At that moment, her expression was unprecedentedly cold. The system, which was one with her, wanted to reduce its sense of existence to zero, for fear that Jiang Pingji would think of it. No, I really can't stand the angry aura of the host. The almost stagnant atmosphere did not last long. Jiang Pingji loosened her fists and opened her eyes, which were clear and bright again. Go and ask them what exactly happened. The coachman got off the carriage and asked. Jiang Pingji lifted the curtain. The bailiffs inside were still moving the corpses. One of them was carrying a large bag of bloody things. Fresh blood stained the coarse cloth and dripped down continuously. The bag contained the broken limbs of other corpses. Jiang Pingji was shocked. Actually, Jiang Pingji did not need the groom to ask. She could piece together a complete picture based on the discussions of the onlookers. A group of strong men in armor, with big knives at their waists and long whips in their hands, entered the gambling house. Not long after, the people inside were all dead. Hey! You mean, the killers and the group at the city gate, are they in cahoots? Someone said mysteriously. He did not dare to raise his voice, for fear of being targeted by the group of killers. They must be in cahoots. Someone saw them break through the city gate and go straight to this gambling house, a life for a life. These executioners should be executed. Chapter 190. Second Lang Jun, I've asked. The coachman came back and whispered to Jiang Pingji through the curtain to make sure she could hear him. After a while, Jiang Pingji asked, is there any sign of the Lu's residence in the carriage today? The coachman was stunned for a moment, and then he answered, Lang Jun, how can I disobey your orders? Although he did not know why his Lang Jun suddenly requested not to take any carriages with the Lu's logo, the Lu's were not poor. They had a few carriages for all kinds of banquets and trips. Okay. Jiang Pingji closed her eyes and said to the coachman, drive the carriage to Shi City first, okay. The coachman whipped the horse, and it moved gently, bypassed the crowd, and went to Shi City. After Jiang Pingji left, there were a few strong men sitting on the second floor of the tea house opposite. The tea on the table was cold, and there was no trace of it being touched. They stared at the gambling house opposite them. They had been waiting for a long time, and there was nothing special. They were the Meng's entourage, and they were there to protect Meng Liang on his way to Shangjing. The person who was being protected like the moon was the leader. The man's eyes were fixed on a carriage that was moving away, and his eyes were filled with doubt. He called the waiter over and pointed at the carriage that was not far away. Do you know which family it belongs to? The waiter stretched his neck awkwardly. He tried to identify it for a long time, but he could not think of any familiar family. It was a very ordinary carriage. The workmanship and materials were common, and even a rich family could afford it. The waiter was confused. Didn't ordinary carriages look like this? There was no family emblem on it, so who could recognize it? Hejin was not a big place, but it was not small either. Those who could afford to take a carriage were as bright as the stars in the sky. He was just a waiter. It was good enough that he could recognize most of the family emblems of the gentry families. It was too difficult for him to recognize the carriage. He laughed awkwardly and said, Sir, you are making things difficult for me. It is just an ordinary carriage. 9 out of 10 carriages in Hejin look like this. I really can't recognize which family it belongs to. At that moment, the group of people had taken off their armors. They did not recognize them for the time being. Leader, what do we do now? The leader did not speak, but his mind was still wandering. He raised his hand and asked one of his attendants to follow the carriage quietly to see which family it belonged to. He didn't know why, but he felt that something was strange. Most people wouldn't want to go near a place where a murder happened, except for those ignorant people who were not afraid of death. Was it not bad luck to die? Not to mention these families who could afford to ride in carriages. However, the leader had no choice but to give up when the attendant came back and reported to Jiang Pingji about the carriage. Leader, I don't think that carriage is suspicious, and it's not Meng Hun's group in disguise. The attendant who followed Jiang Pingji around the west and east districts had a helpless look on his face. Then tell me, why did they stop? The leader asked. The attendant was stunned for a moment, and then stuttered, I guess there are too many people watching the show, and they're blocking the way. The leader, yes, they were used to running amok in Sangzhou. They never had the concept of stopping for passers-by. They just ran amok. But, this was Hejin County. In other words, he had thought that he was smart, but in fact, he was just being stupid. The leader's face darkened when he thought about it. Or rather, it was as dark as the bottom of a pot. Leader, we've been here for a day, and we haven't found Meng Hun and his group. We can't catch them. What should we do now? Meng Liang had been kidnapped by Meng Hun. It was definitely not a good sign. But the leader thought that Meng Liang was not dead, and he had a good reason. The leader said firmly, Go back quickly and tell the master about Second Langjuan's kidnapping. We can't afford to delay. Some of the attendants were still reluctant to make the decision. Leader, if something happens to Second Langjun, won't we be? The attendant made a gesture of cutting his neck with his hand. He looked very nervous. who was not afraid of death. The leader shook his head and said, "Second Lang Jun is definitely not dead. Meng Hun doesn't have the guts." Otherwise, the attendant asked seriously, "Why? Isn't it simple?" The leader opened the 2 bamboo slips and pointed at the one written by Meng Liang. He said with certainty, "Haha, haven't you noticed that Second Lang Jun's writing is neat, clear, and steady? It doesn't look like it was written by a panicked person." In other words, Second Lang Jun must have been sure that he would not die. That's why he wrote this letter. But this Meng Hun is asking for 2,000 dawn of food. Isn't he afraid of being stuffed to death? 2,000 dawn of food was not a small amount. But food was not a big deal. As long as Meng Liang was alive and well, everything would be fine. "Leader, you're so wise." A few attendants flattered him one after another, their mouths uttering flattering and auspicious words of flattery. "So, now is not the time to be hesitant. We have to send these 2 bamboo slips back as soon as possible. As long as we can save Second Lang Jun, it will be a great achievement. Even if the master blames us, who doesn't know that Second Lang Jun's disappearance was because of his naughtiness? Even if there was a punishment, it would not be a heavy one. They would even be rewarded with a lot of money after the incident." Unfortunately, the leader thought that Meng Hun and his men would be impatient and come to check on what had happened in the gambling house. That was why he decided to wait on the 2nd floor of the tea house across the street. But after waiting for half a day, all the bodies in the gambling house had been cleaned up, but there was still no sign of Meng Hun. The leader said, "Pack up and get ready to go back to Zhangzhou. You guys. Where do you think Hejin County is? That you can come and go as you please. Hee, let's all go." A strange voice came from behind. The leader and his attendants were immediately alerted. They looked at the person who spoke. "Let's go. You killed someone here and you still want to walk away. There's no such thing as a free lunch in this world." These people were all guards of the Hejin County Governor's office. Each of them had a knife at their waist, so they were quite capable. The 2 sides were in a stalemate, but a strong dragon could not beat a snake in its own land. The leader of the Meng snorted coldly. He said arrogantly, "How can you catch me now? How are you going to send me back later?" Hearing what he said, the people of Hejin County were instantly filled with righteous indignation. They wanted to pull out their knives and cut them into pieces. Stubborn. The corners of the guard's mouth froze. He looked extremely indignant. Chapter 191. How much power did the Mengs of Zhangzhou have in Dongqing? The Hejin County chief had only heard about it before. Now that he had seen it with his own eyes, he was furious. What did they mean by he was just a small county chief with a title but no power? What could a small official do to him? This is too much. This is too much. The Mengs of Zhangzhou are too much. The Hejin County chief was so angry that he flipped over the table. The fat on his body shook with his movement, and the mustache on his lips almost curled up. It was true that Hejin County was just a small county according to the size of the land and the number of people. But since it was a county, he deserved to be the Hejin County chief. How could he tolerate being humiliated by the servants of the Mengs? The guards of the Hejin County chief's manor who had escorted the people there also looked furious. The leader grinned hideously, raised his hand, and patted the shoulder of the leader of the guards. He whispered to him. "I told you how you brought me here and how you sent me out. Why do you have to humiliate yourself? Let's go." The leader waved his hand, and the 20 or 30 people swaggered out of the Hejin County chief's manor. They were extremely arrogant. In the distance, Jiang Pingji lifted the curtain of the carriage coldly and looked at the arrogant people quietly. They were like roosters who had won a fight. The audience in the streaming room did not witness the whole process, nor did they see how arrogant those people were in the Hejin County chief's manner. However, based on the words of the leader, many people said that they were too arrogant. If they had the ability, why didn't they explode on the spot? I don't agree with the streamer. I'm so angry that my lungs are about to explode. Even Li Gang's son was not so arrogant. The leader was just a servant of the Mangs. How could he be so arrogant? He would not even survive the second episode in a TV series. Inja, to put it bluntly, not only did he survive the second episode, but he also walked out of the Hejin County chief's manor alive. Ili Shabai, alas, that's how the ancient society was. Power could crush people to death, time passes between fingers, it's really annoying. Although I know that people's lives were worthless in ancient times, I didn't expect it to be so cheap. There were at least 50 to 60 corpses brought out of the casino. That was 50 to 60 lives. Pianxian Diao Wu, I don't agree with the saying that time flies. The correct way to put it should be the lives of civilians are like weeds, or even less than weeds. The lives of people with social status are precious. The atmosphere in the live broadcast room was a little quiet. Previously, when they stopped outside the gambling house, many viewers had already left due to the pressure. It was just that the queue for the live stream was always full. After a wave of people was pushed out, there would still be new people filling in. The number of people online had always been stable at 10,000. Jiang Pingji looked at it coldly for a while and suddenly sent a message in the streaming room. Host V, are you guys afraid of blood? The viewers in the live stream were dumbfounded. Why did he suddenly ask this question? Could it be that his nerve reflex arc was too long? The next second, Jiang Pingji added another one. Host V, if you're not afraid, I'll teach you the right way to kill. For a moment, the entire live streaming channel was silent, and the bullet screen was empty for a long time. In just a moment, her vision was drowned by the overwhelming number of 666s. Iya Qingzhou, daily brainwashing task, be impressed by the streamer's handsomeness, completed January 1st. Pianxian Diao Wu, let's not talk about anything else, just based on the streamer's straightforwardness, I have to give you a string of 666. Ili Shabai, do you still need a leg accessory? You can shout 666 in all kinds of positions. The audience in the streaming room was almost boiling. Jiang Pingji's lips had a trace of a sneer. If you're not happy, you'll fight back. Only a tortoise would swallow his anger. Let's go back first. The carriage's curtain was put down, and the coachman lightly whipped the rope. It didn't take long to get to the loose from there. Jiang Pingji directly asked someone to go to the stable and bring the horse over. I have to go out for some things. If father asks where I went, tell him I'll be back before the city gate is locked. Taking the reins, Jiang Pingji easily leaped onto the horse's back. She took a shortcut and avoided the crowded places. Jiang Pingji arrived at the city gate without a hitch. Seeing the indignant expressions on the guards' faces, Jiang Pingji calmed down. She murmured in a low voice, it looks like they just passed the city gate. I should still be able to make it. The inspection at the city gate was not slow. She quickly took the reins and mounted the horse, rushing in the direction of the group. The war horse of the northern borderline was pure white. It had a well-proportioned and handsome body, was good at long-distance raids, and had a long endurance. It was a rare and famous horse. It was the first time Jiang Pingji had ridden it, except for the gathering. They should be right in front. But the terrain is flat, and it's easy to be exposed in a short distance. Let's take a detour and get ahead of them. Seeing the messy and deep hoof prints on the ground, Jiang Pingji's eyes flashed. She slightly pulled the reins and let the horse gallop in another direction. The group of more than 20 people naturally wouldn't expect that someone was following them, waiting for the best time to strike. One of the attendants looked a little worried. He asked the leader, "If the master blames us for abusing the Meng's name, how can that be considered abusing? If it weren't for those people in Heijin County, we would have been at the next station by now." Second Lang Jun was kidnapped by Meng Hun and his gang. Now is the time to save him. Can they afford to waste such an important time? The leader didn't say anything. It was another attendant who spoke. It was not the first time that he had used the Meng's name for his own benefit. "Shut up, all of you. It's more important to get to the next station as soon as possible." The leader pursed his lips. He was anxious. Since the leader had spoken, the others didn't dare to say anything. They all lowered their heads and hurried on. Because of the delay, they couldn't get to the nearest station. The horses were exhausted and needed a rest. The leader looked at the sky and wiped the sweat off his forehead with his sleeve. "Let's rest here first." He sat on a small stool and rested. His whole body was covered in sweat. The others also looked tired. They had rushed to Heijin County after receiving the news from Meng Liang, but they were too late. Meng Hun had already kidnapped Meng Hun. In order to send the scroll back to Zhangzhou as soon as possible, they had to continue their journey. In other words, they hadn't slept for a day and a night. They wanted to go to the nearest station to rest and prepare enough food and water to feed the horses, but they still didn't make it in time. "Leader, we're out of water and food." If they had known this would happen, they would have restocked in Heijin County first. Now they were in the middle of nowhere. It was too cruel. Just send 3 people out to look for him. Rest for an hour. Don't be late. Heijin County was surrounded by deep mountains. There were many ferocious birds and beasts. With their skills, it was easy for them to hunt small prey. On the other side, Jiang Pingji was hiding nearby. She could hear their conversation clearly. Chapter 192. Those horses are good horses. Why don't we take some? It's also a fortune. Jiang Pingji hid in the dark and carefully observed the group. When her eyes fell on the horses, she couldn't help but feel excited. Although those horses were not as good as the best horses, they had excellent bloodlines and belonged to the Meng stable. The Mengs was the only one among the 4 noble families that started with military achievements. They also owned the largest stable in Dongqing. Zhangzhou was located at the intersection of trade routes, so it was very convenient for all kinds of business. The Mengs imported many famous horses from the northern borderline or the southern man. After several generations of breeding, most of the horses in the stable were of excellent quality. However, they only sold the inferior horses. The best and the best quality horses had to be offered to the main family of the Meng family or given to the Meng family as compensation to the army of the Meng family. The royal family of Dongqing wanted good horses, so they had to buy them from the northern borderline or the southern man at a high price. By chance, they learned that the Mengs also had good horses, so the emperor hinted in various ways, hoping that the Mengs would offer a batch of good horses to him. What was the result? The Mengs did not take the emperor seriously at all. They offered a batch of inferior quality horses as a tribute, and bluntly said that the best horses from the stud farm were to be sent to the Mengs army. Not a single one of those good horses was allowed to flow out. This made the emperor of Dongqing very angry. However, the Mengs were indeed not to be trifled with. The emperor of Dongqing was already burning with anger, but he had to maintain an open-minded and hearty appearance. Jiang Pingji didn't want the horses at first, or she didn't even think about it. But their owner was going to die soon. Wouldn't it be a pity if she didn't accept them? As a good girl who didn't like to waste any resources, Jiang Pingji said that the horses were now hers. What if she didn't agree? Hold it in. He sent 3 experienced followers to search for food and water, while the others rested and recovered their strength. I heard that there are many bandits in Hijin. Do you think the 3 of them will run into them? They sat down to rest, and the attendants started chatting. Hey, as long as they are not blind, which bandit will give us trouble? Not to mention 3 people going out together, even if there's only one person, which one of us from the Meng family army doesn't have the imposing manner to fight against 10,000 people? What's so scary about a few mobs? Don't you think so? At the mention of the Meng army's prestige, the attendants suddenly felt a surge of confidence. Indeed, in the whole of Dongqing and even the other 4 countries, who did not know of the reputation of the Meng army? They had guarded Songzhou for many years and helped the royal family of Dongqing protect the vital parts of the country. Wasn't it all thanks to them that Dongqing was able to celebrate peace and prosperity? That's right. But in my opinion, the strongest among us is still the leader. Even that Meng Hun can't compare to you. A follower gently flattered him, and the group of people seemed to have received some sort of hint. Flattery flooded their leader like a tide. The corners of his lips couldn't help but curl up. His heart swayed, and he waited until he was satisfied with the feeling of floating on air before he reprimanded her with a stern face. The leader furrowed his brows and seemed to be very displeased. We're asking you to fix up now, not to gossip like a bunch of gossipy women. If you don't want to rest, then say so earlier. Meng Hun. Ha, a stray dog who betrayed his master isn't qualified to compare to me. The leader is right. We were wrong. How can that hypocritical stray dog, Meng Hun, compare to you? One of the attendants quickly changed his words and flattered the leader with his glib tongue. This attendant clearly had a face full of righteousness, but his eyes darted around from time to time, looking extremely restless. When it came to flattering, he was more active than anyone else. The other attendants immediately followed up and opened their mouths to say, Meng Hun is not qualified to compare to the leader. If you want to compare, throughout the whole of Dongqing, only the Count of Zhenbei's residence is qualified to compare to the leader. I heard that they were beaten up in the northern borderline again. In my opinion, if the leader was the leader, with your talent, you would definitely be able to turn the situation around and beat those bastards in the northern borderline back to their grandmother's house. After hearing this, the leader was in a good mood, as if he was shouting a piece of ice in the hottest days of the year. His whole body was icy cold. The few of them talked about everything and flattered the leader. After a quarter of an hour, the 3 attendants from before still hadn't returned. Of course, they couldn't come back. The 3 attendants were experienced in surviving in the wilderness, but compared to Jiang Pingji, they paled in comparison. She quickly found the nearest water source and laid in ambush, waiting for the 3 prey to take the bait. Soon, the 3 figures came together. One of them said in surprise, "There is water here. You're the best. Don't talk anymore. Fill the water bags first." The 3 of them were carrying many empty leather water bags. If they were to fill all of them and bring them back, the weight would not be light. Jiang Pingji looked at them coldly and squatted down beside the pool. She steadily raised the bow in her hand. She took out 2 arrows from the quiver and quickly drew the bow to a full moon. Swoosh, swoosh, the 2 arrows sank into the brains of the 2 attendants, piercing through the back of their heads. They were instantly killed. The 3rd person was originally seriously filling the water bag with water. Suddenly, he noticed that the surface of the water beside him was dyed red with eye-catching blood. He was slightly stunned. The 2 companions who were talking and laughing with him just a second ago opened their eyes wide in disbelief and fell headfirst into the pool. Enemy attack. 2 words suddenly popped up in the mind of the 3rd person. The water bag in his hand fell to the ground and wet the soil by the shore. He jumped up abruptly and pulled out the broadsword from his waist. He vigilantly looked around. Following the direction of the arrows, he did not see any traces of anyone. How many enemies were there? Where were they? For a moment, these two questions popped up in his mind. The more he thought about it, the more nervous he became. He tensed up and stayed on guard for a long time. Still, no one attacked him. It was as if the two arrows that killed his companions appeared out of thin air. The person looked at the bodies of his two companions and nervously pursed his lips. Then, he gritted his teeth and staggered away. Iechingzhou, host, you let them go just like that. Letting a tiger return to the mountain will cause endless trouble. Gimme, although I think killing is very bloody, the host situation is a special case. You can't generalize. Letting the enemy go is harsher to yourself. That person went to inform the others and called everyone over. Can the host deal with so many people alone? Miu Qingfeng, I want to convince myself that the host can kill more than 20 people, but the host is still a bean sprout, right? Lu Lanting's body was only 12 years old. Compared to the burly men who were 7 feet tall, she was as petite as a white rabbit. Just the difference in physique alone made the viewers in the streaming room nervous. They could not help but break out in cold sweat for Jiang Pingji. Jiang Pingji did not care about the fish that escaped the net. Naturally, her target was not just 2 people. Chapter 193. Host V, don't worry. Letting one fish go is just to attract more stupid fish. She sneered, leaped up, and landed on the dense tree trunk. Her footsteps were light as she walked away. The enemy was in the light while she was in the dark. She always had the initiative. Thanks to the high mountains and deep forests in Hejian County, it was very convenient to hide. Besides, Jiang Pingji knew how not to leave any traces. She shuttled through the forest freely like a dragon in the sea. Bad news. Bad news. Leader, there's an enemy attack. The surviving follower ran towards the crowd in a panic. He almost couldn't catch his breath. His lips were pale, and he kept muttering, enemy attack. 2 of our brothers were killed just now. What? Enemy attack. And 2 of our men were killed. The leader suddenly stood up from the small stool, took 2 steps forward, approached the surviving follower, and said sternly, what enemy attack? The follower gasped for a while, and finally could barely tell, just now, I was fetching water with the other 2. Suddenly, 2 black figures flashed by and attacked us with arrows. We were careless, and the other 2 were shot in the head, and they died. Died? The leader's eyes widened in disbelief, and then he became violent. The people he brought were killed by a sneak attack outside. It must have been done by the bandits near Hejian County. They were really bold. Then you came back just like that. The surviving follower's eyes were red, and he said in a tearful voice, Leader, I also want to fight those 2 beasts to avenge my brother, but I still have to save my life, so I came to report to my brothers. My brother's life can't be lost in vain. If others were to find out that our Meng family army was ambushed and killed by 2 bandits, where would we put our faces? The leader listened with a gloomy face, and his hands clenched into fists. He suddenly took out his whip, and he was full of anger. These mobs have gone too far. The leader gritted his teeth, and then he ordered 20 people, let's go to avenge our brothers. Jiang Pingji's 5 senses were no longer suppressed, and she could hear their conversation from this distance. She couldn't help but laugh. The audience in the streaming room could also clearly hear their conversation with the help of the system. Suddenly, there was a sea of 2,333. Gu Mimi, you have a big imagination. You said it as if you saw it with your own eyes. He doesn't even know where the streamer is, and he said he saw 2 black figures. Is it just because the streamer shot 2 arrows at once? That's ridiculous. Lienming, if the streamer makes 3 consecutive kills later, shouldn't they say that there were 5 people who attacked them? Mu Qingfeng, they have to say that. If they don't make the situation more dangerous, how can they explain that they were so scared that they peed their pants, and left their brothers' bodies, and ran away? He was still too young. If he was a little more thick-skinned, he might have directly bragged that there was a platoon of bandits watching him, that he was skilled in martial arts, and that he had broken through the encirclement left and right and finally escaped. Everybody lift chestnut together. Ha ha ha, I'm impressed by the comment above. Jiang Pingji waited in a good mood. Although she was not used to using ancient bows and arrows, it was the same as a sniper. Compared with a sniper, she preferred to move from one place to another after shooting. Bows and arrows could not be compared with a sniper rifle. The former's speed and destructive power were too small. Squatting in the same place was simply telling the enemy where she was. Host V, Liu Lienming, I think your suggestion is acceptable. Jiang Pingji drew 3 arrows from the quiver, raised the bowstring to a full moon, and did not move. She squinted her sharp eyes, waiting for the best opportunity. There were 5 people left to guard the horses and luggage. They seemed to be standing loosely, but they were actually very alert. The young man who had survived was left behind. He ran in a panic and accidentally fell twice. He looked very embarrassed. His companion comforted him. Look at you. 2 bandits scared you so much. Look, hasn't the leader already brought people over? If the leader goes out, not to mention 2 bandits, even an entire bandit stronghold will be wiped out by him. The surviving follower was still shivering. His forehead was stained with 2 pieces of mud. Blood mixed with the mud. He smiled reluctantly and was about to look up to thank her when a shadow blocked the sun above his head. The next second, a warm weight fell on him, catching him off guard. Warm, scarlet blood dripped onto his face and almost into his eyes. Whoosh, Jiang Pingji could not shoot 2 arrows at the same time because of her position. It was difficult to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so she shot continuously at a very fast speed. Enemy, enemy, enemy attack. The attendant raised his hand and pushed away his companion, whose brain had been pierced through. His vision was restored, but there were 4 more corpses around him. Before they could react, they had already passed away. The horse that was quietly nibbling on the grass did not panic at all, nor was it frightened. It was as if the 4 arrows that took their lives just flew out of thin air, without a trace of murderous intent. Jiang Pingji glanced at the follower's almost collapsed expression with satisfaction. Her eyes darkened, and she turned back to the previous pool. At that moment, the leader had brought people to the pool where the incident happened. 2 bodies were floating alone, blood stained the water, and the 2 arrows that had pierced through their brains were still hanging on them. The leader's face darkened and he asked people to go forward and fish up the bodies. He raised his hand and pulled out one of the arrows, not caring about the colorful liquid splashed on his body. He turned the arrow over and did not see any special personal marks on it. It seemed that it was really done by bandits. The leader pondered and said, "Go check around and see if there are any traces of other people's activities." After a search, the result was regrettable. It seemed that the 2 people who attacked them were ghosts without feet. There were no other footprints or traces of other people's activities on the ground. The leader did not believe it and went to check for himself. It was true. At that moment, someone could not help but murmur in his heart. They said they saw 2 shadows. Could it be ghosts? Shut up. How could there be ghosts in broad daylight? Although someone refuted, everyone was still a little scared. At that moment, a cold wind blew through the forest, making their scalps numb. "Leader, we can't find any evidence here, and there are no traces of other bandits. Should we continue to search?" The leader broke an arrow. It seemed that he could not understand why there was no trace at all. How did the other party do it? Ghosts? Only mediocre people would believe that. The leader did not give up and checked again. In the end, he had no choice but to go back. A total of 28 horses were still in their original place. If they were robbed at that time, they would suffer a loss. Wait. Chapter 194. Just as he finished speaking, an arrow pierced through the air, directly piercing through the chest of a person who was standing relatively far away. Ugh! A muffled sound rang out, and everyone looked towards the source of the sound, just in time to see the man raising his hand to cover his chest, a look of disbelief on his face. They saw his burly body slowly fall backwards, blood flowing out from his completely shattered heart, staining the ground red. Before he died, his eyes were still wide open as if he had seen a malicious ghost. The scene was creepy. Could it be that there were really malicious ghosts in the forest? Don't panic. You are a man. Why are you afraid of ghosts? The leader shouted, which brought everyone back to their senses. He raised his sword and walked a few steps toward the direction where the arrow came from with a gloomy face. The grass and shrubs could not withstand the sharpness of the sword and were chopped down to the ground. No. Still no trace. Where was the ambusher hiding? The leader looked at the ground where there was no trace of a living person. His expression was like a wall with a few cracks. Another scream was heard. Another man was pierced through the chest by an unknown arrow. The direction of the arrow was far away from the leader. The leader hurried back and saw that the man was dead. Just like the previous man, he was shot in the heart and died. He checked the wound and could no longer control his violent emotions. Since he began to work for the Mangs, he was used to being flattered and flattered. When had he ever been humiliated like this? He was toyed with by a bunch of nobodies who came out of nowhere. What was even more hateful was that the other party had never revealed themselves from the beginning to the end. Playing tricks on us. We don't need to be afraid of them. The leader stood up and said to the others, "Are you all stupid? They pointed their arrows at you and you didn't feel it at all. You are still standing in 2s and 3s, the leader's scolding made the others tremble. They did not dare to be so careless and spread out in 2s and 3s. Instead, they formed a more orderly formation. Compared to the unknown, malicious ghost, the leader was more terrifying. Seeing that, Jiang Pingji had already quietly moved to another place. How stupid. It doesn't feel challenging at all. Jiang Pingji smiled. The enemy was in the light while she was in the dark. She had the initiative in her hands. Regardless of whether the enemy gathered in a group or dispersed in 2s or 3s, it was all useless unless they could feel her breath or detect her murderous actions in advance. Killing aura seemed illusory, but it really existed. It was just that it couldn't be touched or seen. Some martial artists worked hard to train themselves and improve their 5 senses. They would vaguely develop a mysterious intuition. When others stared at them, they would feel it, not to mention the killing intent that was filled with malice. The leader was indeed capable. His 5 senses had also reached such a level that he could sense the killing intent and stares of others. However, how could Jiang Pingji's standard be the same as theirs? A genetic warrior whose killing intent could be sensed by others was already the worst of the worst. It was simply impossible for him to participate in a mission. Jiang Pingji also had rich experience in sniping and killing. She succeeded every time. If she could not perfectly restrain this killing intent and reduce her presence by 100%, according to the 5 senses of the people in the future, it would not be called a sneak attack. It would be telling the enemy her position and trying to kill them. Then what was there to play? The audience in the streaming room was watching excitedly. It seemed that after the shock of seeing blood for the first time, they had calmed down. Wanyue, #laughter cry. I have a déjà vu of a high-level golden godly outfit massacring the novice players in the novice village. Ace Huahua, it's obviously a godly character who has ascended to immortality. Zhongfei Xingchen of last night, it's better to be crushed. It feels good. I like the feeling of killing a bunch of small monsters with one slash. Jiang Pingji curled her lips. Huddling together would only make them die more quickly. Host V, I'll show you what it means to kill two birds with one stone. As soon as she finished speaking, the arrow had already pierced through the air. Jiang Pingji changed to another place without looking back. Swoosh, an arrow pierced through the air. The crowd only noticed its existence when it got close, but it was too late. Another two. Jiang Pingji did not have to look to know that she had taken down two more enemies. At that moment, the number of casualties had reached a terrifying number. They did not see the shadow of the ambushers from beginning to end, but their companions fell one after another. The leader was safe and sound in the middle, but the two people who had been killed were very close to him. They fell in the direction of the leader. With such archery skills, they can't be bandits. The leader pushed the body that fell on him away. A trace of unwillingness flashed across his face. However, he also knew that if they continued to stay in the dense forest, they would only silently lose more people. Could it be the people in Hejin County seeking revenge? One of the followers guessed with fear. The leader snorted coldly and said contemptuously, "Those people don't have the guts to. If this was not the case, that was not the case." Then who was the culprit? Could it be that a malicious ghost really appeared in broad daylight? For a moment, everyone was in a state of panic. Seeing them retreat and then looking at the reserves in the quiver, Jiang Pingji's smile was somewhat evil. Since they had already set foot on the road to hell, how could they escape? It was not difficult for Jiang Pingji to shoot while moving. The only difficulty was that she had to pay attention to hiding while moving. The atmosphere became more terrifying and gloomy. The tense atmosphere and the shadow of death shrouded everyone's hearts. Dong, the head of one of the followers who fell at the back of the group, was pierced through from the temple by an arrow. He was directly nailed to a tree trunk not far away. What are you panicking for? Retreat. The leader heard the strange sound at the back of the group. His heart suddenly sank. He knew that another life had been quietly taken. The same scene happened one after another. Jiang Pingji was like the most experienced hunter. It was as if she had thoroughly understood the dense forest. No matter how the group of people ran or panicked, she could maintain a fairly safe range. She was like an experienced cat, and those people were the mice that she chased. She destroyed their psychological defenses bit by bit. When she was done playing with them, she would kill them with one blow. The leader was about to have a nervous breakdown after being shot one after another. Even though he looked calm on the surface, he still could not hide the guilt in his heart. Yes, guilt. He couldn't sense where the arrows were coming from, and he didn't know what their target was. Chapter 195. No way. It couldn't go on like this. The only way was to leave the dense forest and go to an open area. When there was nothing to hide behind, he wanted to see how the enemy would attack. In this regard, Jiang Pingji could clearly tell the enemy that those who deserved to die would still die. It had little to do with where they died. It was not easy to escape from the dense forest. Originally, he had brought 20 followers with him, but now there were only 2 left. The closer they got to the exit of the dense forest, the more frequently Jiang Pingji shot. Seeing that they had escaped, any normal person would feel relaxed. It was also the best opportunity to attack. However, when the leader brought the remaining 2 survivors to the place where they had rested, what they saw were 4 bodies lying in a pool of blood. The leader's eyes were wide open, and his fierce look scared the 2 followers who followed him. The only survivor was the follower who had gone to fetch water and was lucky enough to survive. Why? Of the 5 people who stayed, 4 were dead, and only this one was alive. Of the 3 people who went to fetch water, 2 were dead, and only this one was alive. The anger in the leader's heart could no longer be suppressed. He strode forward and grabbed the follower's collar. "Tell me, did you kill them? Tell me, are you a spy for those villains? Did you deliberately lure us there?" The leader glared at the follower, who had been scared to the point of delirium. His face was smeared with sticky blood. The audience in the streaming room was speechless. Wait, what kind of weird development was this? Why did they suddenly have internal strife? No, internal strife was internal strife. Why did they suspect that the unlucky guy who had been scared twice by the streamer was the murderer? Fingji Liao Yuan, ha ha ha, I feel sorry for him. First, he was scared twice by the streamer, and now he's suspected to be the murderer. Shuang Xiang, sorry, really very sorry. No, I laughed so hard that my stomach hurts. Did the leader become a stick? Lu Siji Lianming, I bet a spicy stick. This is definitely an Easter egg left by the streamer on purpose to test their intelligence. It was no wonder that the viewers in the live streaming channel were so happy. This turn of events had shocked everyone. The followers around the leader were all brought here by himself. He knew everyone's background, so it was impossible for there to be a spy. Of course, it was also possible under extreme circumstances. Some viewers in the live stream room were mocking him, but naturally, there were also people who had different opinions. Chestnut is delicious, am I the only one who thinks the leader's reaction is normal? After being scared by the streamer so many times, and seeing the people around him die one after another, the psychological pressure was unimaginable. Under such circumstances, it was impossible to maintain a normal level of thinking, and they would definitely subconsciously suspect the most suspicious person. Who was the most suspicious person at the moment? It must be the survivor. Putting himself in their shoes, if he was one of the members of the team, facing a completely clueless enemy, and every time the enemy attacked, one member of the team would definitely die, and no one would know if he or she would be the next target. The fear of death lingered in one's heart. The Grim Reaper's footsteps were hot on one's heels. Even a person with a strong mental defense would collapse in an instant under such a dense frequency of attacks. However, from God's perspective, the leader's judgment was indeed laughable. At this time, the audience in the live broadcast room was silent, and then they agreed to speak. Not to mention anything else, they just said that the host had too much bad taste. Jiang Pingji smiled. Her bad taste was yet to come. Tell me, did you kill them? Tell me. The leader grabbed the other's collar and roared as he questioned. At the same time, Jiang Pingji steadily raised the bow, drew an arrow, and aimed at the target. Swoosh! In the next moment, blood burst out and covered his face. His neck seemed to be strangled by an invisible hand, and it forcibly stopped him from speaking. That's bad taste. Jiang Pingji snorted coldly, and another wave of 666 flew by in the live broadcast room. My host, you're amazing. Jiang Pingji was too lazy to struggle with the last few shrimps. She raised her hand, put her finger to her lips, and whistled. The horse neighed, and the sound of hooves came from afar. A vigorous white figure galloped out of the dense forest. The other horses seemed to be summoned, and they all ran toward the white horse. The scene was chaotic. Game over. Jiang Pingji drew her bow for the last time, and killed 2 birds with 1 stone. She took the lives of the 2 people beside the leader. She had said that 1 messenger was enough. Let's go. Pack up and go home. The white horse galloped toward her. Jiang Pingji smiled, ran 2 steps forward, and jumped on the horse's back. The pure-blooded warhorse of the northern borderline was indeed worthy of its reputation. Only then did the leaders see who had ambushed them. Just as he was about to draw his bow and shoot an arrow, the horse galloped wildly, kicking up a cloud of dust and blocking his line of sight. All he could see was the buttocks of the horse and the small figure that had already become a small dot in the distance. Humph! The leader was so angry that he threw the bow and arrow in his hand to the ground. None of the 27 followers around him survived. Who is it? That's too much. The leader spat out these words through gritted teeth, and a smell of iron spread in his mouth. The only thing he could be thankful for was that his horse had a good relationship with him, and it was not affected by the white horse. Otherwise, he would have to walk to the next station with an empty stomach. In the future, I will take revenge. Jiang Pingji did not care whether he wanted to take revenge or not. Even his life was deliberately spared. If it were not for the messenger, he would have died and gone to hell to show off his arrogance to the king of hell. Jiang Pingji hung up the bow and put the quiver back. She leisurely sat on the horse's back and let the white horse walk around as it pleased. She led a group of brothers to look for food. The horses were intimidated by the white horse's imposing manner, so they all became obedient. It seems that you are the king of horses. Jiang Pingji saw that and patted the horse's neck with a smile. The horse responded with a loud snort. Its beautiful and smooth mane swayed slightly with its movements, brushing against her wrist and making her feel a little itchy. What a proud little girl. Yes, it was a mare, but it was more hot-tempered than any stallion. It liked to kick its hooves at the slightest provocation. Jiang Pingji carefully counted the number of horses. There were exactly 27 of them. Host V, this is a big win. It seems that robbing the enemy to help me is good for my health. What do you mean by robbing the enemy to help me? Host, your worldview has fallen to the ground. Do you want to bend down and pick it up? The viewers in the streaming room said that they had lived for a long time, but they liked Jiang Pingji's carefree and unrestrained behavior. So, their worldview had been led astray by the host. Chapter 196. Jiang Pingji jumped down from the horse's back. The white horse was very understanding. It rubbed her cheek affectionately and then ran to the side to nibble on the grass. I wonder when I can eat pears. Looking at the pear trees by the banks of the Yishui River, Jiang Pingji took a deep breath. Her nose was filled with the fresh fragrance of pears. At this time, no one was holding a gathering on the bank of the Yi River, so there was no one on the bank at all, except for the constantly moving horse butts. Jiang Pingji walked straight to the shore. She kicked off her wooden clogs and took off her socks. She dipped her feet into the water and sighed. A cool feeling spread from the tip of her toes to the rest of her body. Jiang Pingji placed her hands on the stones by the river and leaned back slightly to look at the sky. Shu Shu loves lowly. I was quietly lurking, but the host's feet blew me out. Lu Siji Lianmeng, I think this is today's benefit. The foot control group is blessed. Lu Shi was, after all, a spoiled child. Whether it was riding a horse, shooting a gun, or running, his skin was always a little delicate. Now, his feet had a few red blisters, burning hot. When he touched the cold river water, he shivered in comfort. Looks like I still need to practice more. It's not good to get blisters so easily. Jiang Pingji was bored. She used the tip of her foot to stir up ripples on the surface of the water. When the blisters were no longer so hot and uncomfortable, she prepared to go ashore. However, before she could pull her feet out of the water, she found a tall young man in a lake blue scholarly robe standing not far away. He looked to be about 18 or 19 years old, with skin as delicate as flawless porcelain, bright eyes, red lips, and white teeth. His thin, moderately thick lips were curved. This was a face that easily gave people a good impression. It seemed that he was smiling at everyone. However, at this moment, the young man pursed his lips tightly with a hint of anger. The bunch of people in the live streaming room who were obsessed with looks started to shout again, and all kinds of flattering comments flooded the bullet screen. Durian-flavored milk, I can't take it anymore, I can't take it anymore. What a beautiful young man. Ah! Although I know that ancient times were very cruel and dangerous, the moment I saw this young man, all those hardships go to hell. Kojiao Chi fan, I'm not convinced. Why were the ancient people so good-looking? Didn't they all say that they were ugly? Host Jingjing Shangwa, although the host is my true love, the moment I saw the young man, I wanted to climb the wall. Such bullet screens almost blocked Jiang Pingji's vision. In the end, she had no choice but to block some of them. Jiang Pingji looked around and confirmed that there was no one else but her. Did that mean that the young man was angry at her? The young man's porcelain-like face showed a little anger. He looked at her accusingly, as if she had done something infuriating. No. What else had she done other than soaking her feet and raising more than 20 horses? Could it be that those free-range horses went to take advantage of him? Just as he was puzzled, a bullet screen in the live broadcast room inspired him. Ace Huahua, haha, by the way, is that handsome young man drinking water downstream? It seemed that he was quite angry. Jiang Pingji was speechless. She lowered her head to look at her feet that were still soaking in the water. She then raised her head to look at the young man's almost red face. She was speechless. She was to blame. She calmly put on her socks and wooden clogs. Jiang Pingji whistled and the big white horse galloped over. Behind it, there were a total of 27 well-proportioned horses of different colors. Obviously, the big white horse had become the leader of the horses. Jiang Pingji didn't even need to deliberately drive it. Jiang Pingji murmured, nowadays, horses are becoming intelligent. She sat on the horse and glanced at the young man who was still standing in the same place. She moved the reins and signaled the big white horse to go over. Jiang Pingji sat on the horse and bowed to the young man. May I know your name? The young man was very tall, but he was still a head shorter than the big white horse. When the big white horse lowered its head and snorted at him, the young man hurriedly stepped back with a bit of panic on his face. Seeing that, Jiang Pingji patted the horse's neck and signaled the little girl not to bully him on purpose. Judging from your clothes, you don't look like a local. The young man calmed down and looked at her with mixed feelings. After a while, he bowed back and said, I'm from Langyi. You can call me Hanyu. Hanyu? What about his courtesy name? Jiang Pingji subconsciously thought of this question. After all, the ancient people's naming habits were really annoying. But then she remembered that only close friends or elders could use courtesy names. She narrowed her eyes and asked, my name is Lu Shi. I'm a local of Hejian. I saw you staring at me just now. Do you have any difficulties? The young man's face became even uglier when he heard the question. Jiang Pingji laughed in her heart. The audience in the streaming room complained that she was too mean. Han Yu was choked by her straightforward question, but he couldn't just say that he just drank some water to quench his thirst. Han Yu's face became even uglier when he thought of that. He had no choice. His water bag was empty and there was still some distance to go into the city. He could only fetch water from the spot. He didn't expect that someone would soak her feet in the water. Should he be glad that she was not using the toilet? Han Yu lowered his head subconsciously and looked at Jiang Pingji's feet which were wearing socks. He felt a little uncomfortable in his stomach. Jiang Pingji said again, I was rude just now. My feet hurt a little because of the long journey. I just soaked my feet for a while and found that you were looking at me like that. I thought that the horses around me provoked you. Did they do anything to you? Han Yu's pale face looked much better after hearing that. His white cheeks became rosy again. The horses didn't make fun of me. Are they war horses? Han Yu said. He glanced at the horses that Jiang Pingji mentioned. He seemed to find something and his pupils slightly shrank. I don't know if they are war horses, but they are definitely good horses. Jiang Pingji smiled and stroked the mane of the big white horse. The horse rubbed against her palm intimately and licked it from time to time. I took Whitey out for 2 laps and let it go to find food by itself. I didn't expect that it would bring back so many horses. I was also very surprised. Han Yu was very surprised. He looked at the big white horse with sparkling eyes and said, This horse has a well-proportioned body and strong hooves. Its eyes are full of intelligence and it has a ferociousness that normal horses don't have. Is this a good horse from the northern borderline? It should be. My father specially sent it to me. It is said that it is a good horse that was carefully selected from the royal horse farm in the northern borderline. Jiang Pingji said, I don't know much about horses, but Whitey is full of intelligence. It seems that it can understand what I said. In the whole family, I am the only one who is close to it. Jiang Pingji's words were really shameless. Chapter 197. Compared to the white horse, Han Yu was more concerned about the other 27 horses. They were from the Meng's horse farm. Horses of such quality were usually provided to the Meng's army. Outsiders couldn't buy them. Now there were 27 more horses, which made Han Yu feel a little uneasy. So, Han Yu asked, Do you know who the owner of these horses is? Jiang Pingji sneered. She never asked for the names of people she killed, and there was no need to. They were all dead anyway. But she said, I don't know. Do you know? Han Yu said with certainty, This is a fine horse from the stable of the Mengs in Changzhou. Only those with a high status in the Meng's army are qualified to own such a fine horse. Lu Langjun is in trouble, Jiang Pingji said carelessly. Why? It's just a few animals carrying people. How can they kill people? Han Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He suddenly put on a serious face and said, Not only will they kill people, but they will also implicate the whole family. Is it that serious? Han Yu saw that she didn't believe him, so he explained the stakes to her very seriously. Don't doubt me, Lu Langjun. There was a tragedy in Meng County in Changzhou. Someone stole a horse belonging to the Mengs, and the whole family was involved. They were trampled to death on the horse farm. I didn't steal these horses. They came here by themselves. Jiang Pingji said seriously, but what you said reminds me of one thing. These horses are indeed easy to get into trouble. I have to find a way to get rid of them as soon as possible. Han Yu was speechless. Jiang Pingji smiled coldly. Langjun, you said that I'm a thief. Since I've already taken the blame, why don't I just sell all the horses and make some money? No matter how angry the Mengs are, they have to find me first. Han Yu was alert and smart. He immediately understood why Jiang Pingji's attitude toward him had changed so much. He immediately apologized. You don't have to be so angry, Lu Langjun. I used that tragedy as an example to tell you to think twice before you act. The Meng family is powerful and arrogant. Ordinary people can't fight against them. I have no intention of slandering you for stealing. Jiang Pingji tightened her grip on the horse's belly and the white horse took 2 steps forward. She said proudly, It doesn't matter. Since I dare to accept these troublesome little fellows, I naturally have my own reasons. Seeing her like this, Hanyu didn't continue to insist. Maybe she really had the right to be arrogant, and he would only annoy her if he tried to dissuade her. The two of them had only met by chance, and there was a misunderstanding at the beginning. Naturally, there was nothing much to talk about, and they soon parted ways. The livestream viewers felt that it was a pity. It was rare to see such a handsome, sunny boy. It would be a pity if they did not lick his boots for a while. To avoid encountering people who knew about horses, Jiang Pingji took a shortcut and leisurely let the white horse carry her to the farm. Wow, what a big horse! So high! The children in the village had never seen so many horses. A bunch of naughty children came forward, their faces full of curiosity. Everyone wanted to reach out and touch the horse's hooves, but Jiang Pingji didn't allow it. War horses were hot-tempered. If they accidentally angered one of them, they would lose their lives if they were rewarded with a hoof. Lang Jun. Lang Jun, these, Jiang Pingji jumped off the horse. Xiaoyu, you came just in time. Ask Coach Meng to bring the horses into the farm. Remember to tie them all up. Su Ke thought that was not the point. The point was, didn't Lang Jun always say that he was very poor, and that he needed to be thrifty here and there, even to the extent of losing his mind? So, where did he get the money to buy so many war horses? Even though Su Ke didn't know much about horses, he still had the basic insight. He didn't know how good the horses were, but he knew that they were indeed excellent. So, where did Lang Jun kill people and set fires? How did he get so many? Su Ke accidentally blurted out what was on his mind. Jiang Pingji tilted her head and stared at him, which made his hair stand on end, as if he was going to explode in the next second. Unexpectedly, Jiang Pingji just nodded seriously and said, Xiaoyu, you know me best. Su Ke was dumbfounded. The viewers in the live stream almost burst out laughing. Although he was not as handsome as Hanyu, Su Ke was still very handsome. Lang Jun, you, really, killed people and set fires. Su Ke didn't know how to react. However, when he saw Jiang Pingji's half-smile, Su Ke suddenly realized that something was wrong. I killed people, but I didn't set fires, Jiang Pingji said seriously and added, setting fire to the forest is a serious crime. In Jiang Pingji's era, wood resources were scarce. Only the rich and the aristocratic families could afford pure wood furniture. In order to protect the decreasing forest resources, the relevant regulations were introduced. Setting fire to the forest was a serious crime, and it could lead to death. Su Ke heard that and felt slightly relieved. No, he didn't set fire, so he couldn't kill people. At that moment, he carefully counted the number of horses. Minus the one that belonged to his Lang Jun, there were 27 left. 27. Thinking about the number and the killing that his Lang Jun said, he seemed to understand something. Anyway, I took them from the Mangs. It doesn't cost me anything. Jiang Pingji raised her hand and patted Su Ke's shoulder. But the horses raised by the Mangs have special marks. People who know horses can easily recognize them. This is going to be a problem. Before Su Ke could react, Jiang Pingji had already made a decision. Find a way to sell them. They can probably be worth a lot of money. Sell the horses. Su Ke's mind flashed with the approximate market value of the horses. Horses used for transportation were usually not cheap, and a horse like this was worth dozens of times more. But won't it be a pity, men always had some characteristics that never changed, no matter what time it was. For example, men in Jiang Pingji's era had a special love for mechas. Some people even joked that mechas were men's true love. In this era, men seem to be like this as well. They had a unique love for strong and healthy horses. Jiang Pingji said, I can keep them, but I don't think it's necessary. I killed those lackeys of the Mengs and only left one alive to report back. If they know that these horses are in my hands. Su Ku was suddenly shocked and immediately sobered up. He was still very rational when it came to his personal interests and interests. If that's the case, we'd better find a way to sell the horses as soon as possible. It's fine even if the price is lower. We can't keep them and cause trouble. Su Ku had already started to calculate in his mind how much money and food the horses could bring them. Yes, but I don't know how to sell them. We'll need to find a slightly more professional person. Jiang Pingji smiled. The Mengs were a jinx to others, but they seemed to be a blessing to her. Chapter 198. According to Jiang Pingji, it would be better to sell the warhorses so that the Mengs wouldn't trace them back to her. Su Ku even started to make a budget, but Meng Han put forward a different opinion after he heard about it. I don't agree with your decision. The loss is too great. Meng Han licked his dry lips and looked at the plump and strong warhorses with a burning gaze. For a general, a horse that they liked was like a second companion. It's better to hide them in the mountains for a while and wait for the Mengs to die down before plotting other things. Jiang Pingji focused on the first sentence. How great is the loss? Meng Han said, for example, a good warhorse like this is worth 70 to 80 taels of silver. That's the price of a fair deal. If you sell it to a horse dealer privately, they will buy it at a much higher price. Usually, they will reduce the price by 40 to 50%, that much? Jiang Pingji asked. That's at least a horse dealer with a conscience. If they bully someone who doesn't know the trade, they will be even worse. Warhorses are different. If they have internal injuries, they will be worthless. That's why they are more expensive. But if they are sold privately, the price will be reduced even more. Meng Han sighed and raised his hand to stroke the mane of a maroon warhorse. The horse was strong and the muscles under his palm were tight and full of strength. It was fascinating. Su Ku was in a dilemma. It would be a loss if he sold them, but it was too risky to keep them. Even if they were hidden deep in the mountains, they would still be found. Jiang Pingji looked down and thought for a while. I'll listen to you this time. Anyway, we got them out of nowhere. No matter how we deal with them, it won't be a loss. We will need to train riding and shooting in the future. With them, at least we don't have to buy extra horses. It will save us a lot of money. Su Ku asked, but if that's the case, and someone finds their tracks and suspects, Jiang Pingji reacted quickly. When she agreed to Meng Han's suggestion, she already had a solution in mind. It's not difficult. I originally wanted to move the troops training from the farm to the mountains, Jiang Pingji said. Jiang Pingji said, but not now. Find a way to hide these horses. It doesn't matter if they are exposed. The Mengs can't do anything to me, Jiang Pingji smiled innocently as she spoke. After all, I'm just a powerless aristocrat. How could I have ambushed 28 of them, killed 27 of them, and left one alive? Isn't it more believable to say that Meng Han did it? Su Ku almost couldn't hold back the smile on his face. Before Meng Han joined the team, you could trick him, but now that he was a friend, you still want to trick him like this. Do you have any shame? What was eye-opening was that Meng Han actually felt that it made sense. That's true. Ordinary people would definitely think so. Although the young Lang Jun is skilled in martial arts, how could he be compared to the followers of the Meng family? These horses are in your hands. You can say that you bought them from a horse dealer in the black market. What can the Meng family do to you if they want to settle accounts with you? Meng Han gave a simple and honest smile. If an ordinary person told the Meng family this, he or she would definitely be in trouble. But Jiang Pingji had someone to rely on. It was just 20 horses. The Meng family didn't lack them. What they lacked was an excuse. What they lacked was face. Jiang Pingji's reason was reasonable. Would the Meng family dare to go against the Lu family for 20 horses? If that's the case, these horses can be kept in the mountains. But they are hot-tempered. It's better to find someone who has experience in raising horses, so that they won't get hurt. Jiang Pingji made the final decision. Meng Hun's smile deepened. 27 horses. No matter what, he could at least get one, right? The maroon horse next to him was not bad. Both its appearance and temperament were to his liking. Su Ke saw that and secretly put his hand on his forehead. He had a headache. His Lang Jun killed and robbed people without saying a word. Even though it was the Meng family that was robbed and killed, his Lang Jun was born in a noble family. The Lu family didn't lack anything. Why? Why did his Lang Jun become such a gangster? Meng Hun next to him was the same. He was fine before, but now he seemed to be affected by his Lang Jun. No. How long had it been since they hooked up? The speed of their influence was too fast. Su Ke looked like he had nothing left to live for. He watched Meng Hun call people to take the horses away. The food that these war horses usually eat should be different from that of ordinary horses, right? Meng Hun said, of course. They eat more carefully and more expensive. The veins on Su Ke's forehead bulged. Those horses were all masters who needed to be served. Alas, I hope the books will be sent to the Meng soon. Otherwise, Lang Jun won't be able to keep them. Su Ke was in charge of the accounts. He knew the financial situation best. They still needed the support of the Lus. The entire troop, including 40 to 50 mouths and 27 horses, was counting on the Mengs. Meng Hun was speechless. One was marked by the company one kept. Maybe Meng Hun was not the only one who had changed. Su Ke had also become more shameless. Their family's Lang Jun was really poisonous. Feng Huayu, you made me look for you so hard. Feng Jin planned to find Jiang Pingji that day. He didn't expect to hear a familiar voice as soon as he got into the carriage. He opened the curtain. Hey, it was an acquaintance. Wenbin. Feng Jin got out of the carriage. The joy of meeting an old friend flashed across his young face. Why are you here? They greeted each other, and Feng Jin welcomed the good-looking young man in a lake blue scholar's robe into the door. I was preparing for the assessment. I wanted to invite you, but I didn't expect your third brother to tell me that you accompanied the fourth prince to Hejin. It's not far, so I took a detour. Maybe I could meet you. I saw you from afar as soon as I entered the city. The young man had a bright smile on his face. He was not as reserved as ordinary people. His eyebrows were full of vitality. Feng Jin smiled bitterly. Wenbin, you came at the right time. Do me a favor. What's wrong? Hanyu raised his eyebrows and smiled. Are you entangled with some passionate girl? They were friends who grew up together and they were the same age. Feng Jin let go of his usual calmness in front of Hanyu. Look at you. You are getting more and more improper. I really don't know how Master Yuanjing taught you. Feng Jin patted Hanyu's shoulder and whispered, the fourth prince likes to hang out in the brothels, but he calls me out every time. I can't stand it. Could it be that the fourth prince is interested in Huayu's beauty? Hanyu had an indescribable expression on his face. Feng Jin coughed and lowered his voice. Of course not. I don't like to go to those brothels. He didn't like to go there, but he was called out to go there. It was okay to refuse him once or twice, but he refused him every time. Even a fool would know something was wrong. Chapter 199. Hanyu raised his eyebrows and teased, "So, what do you want me to help you with? He doesn't know you well. If he wants to drive you away, just pretend that you don't understand." Wuma Jun went to the brothel every few days to make friends with Lu Shi. He liked to invite Feng Jin along every time. Now that Han Yu was here, Feng Jin had an excuse to get away. You should have just rejected him directly. What can a useless fourth prince do to you? You are just trying to save face, Han Yu said carelessly. Feng Jin was not valued, but he was still the second son of the Feng family. If he didn't want to do something, Wuma Jun couldn't force him to do it. Feng Jin smiled bitterly. A leopard couldn't change its spots. It was his nature, and it wasn't easy to change it. Wuma Jun was annoying, but Feng Jin didn't want to offend the fourth prince yet. There was no need to make it ugly. Han Yu still had the same temperament. I haven't seen you for a few years. I thought you would be less temperamental after you became Master Yuanjing's disciple. I didn't expect it to get worse. Your temperament is quite similar to the good friend I've made recently. Perhaps the two of you will get along well. Han Yu raised his eyebrows and said with interest, "There are not many people who can be praised by you, Feng Huaiyu." Not to mention that his temperament was similar to his. She is a wonderful person. Feng Jin thought of Jiang Pingji, and the smile on his face became wider. Han Yu was quite surprised. Tsk. Could it be that the good friend Huaiyu is talking about is actually a beautiful lady? Is she your confidant? I think you asked me to help you get rid of the fourth prince so that you could have some time to meet your confidant. His smile was so sweet that Han Yu felt like he was going to be blinded. Feng Jin's smile became more and more helpless after hearing what Han Yu said. Although his good friend was indeed a woman, she was not a confidant. He didn't know what Han Yu was thinking about. Of course it's not a wife, and it's not a close female friend. It's a good friend. Wenbin can't slander Feng Jin's style just because of his experience. I originally wanted to introduce the two of you to each other, but now that I see that you have a big mouth, I think it's better to forget about it. Feng Jin and Han Yu were good friends who grew up together. They were as close as brothers and would occasionally make some harmless jokes. Hey, don't. He must be a rare young talent to be praised by Huaiyu. I want to get to know him. Only then did Feng Jin let go of Han Yu. If Wenbin had come a little later, I'm afraid I would have gone to find Lanting. Han Yu couldn't help but be interested in the Lanting that Feng Jin had mentioned. He wanted to see what kind of talent Lanting had. As a student of Master Yuanjing, Han Yu had seen too many young talents who claimed to be gifted by the heavens. One or two of them tried to be Master Yuanjing's disciples, but what was the result? It was either an exaggeration or an unworthy name. There were only a few people who could catch Han Yu's eye. Han Yu said, "It's not too late to visit now." Feng Jin hesitated for a moment before nodding. All right. Because of the addition of Han Yu, Feng Jin specially wrote a visiting card. Otherwise, it would be too rude to bring someone he didn't know directly to his door. Unfortunately, the concierge told Feng Jin that his Lang Jun had been away for some time. Did Lanting say when he would come back? Feng Jin asked in a good temper. The gatekeeper thought for a moment and said, Lang Jun only said that he would come back before the city gate is locked. Before the city gate is locked. Looking up at the sky, it was obvious that he couldn't wait any longer. If that's the case, I'll have to trouble you to tell Lanting that I've been here. The gatekeeper said respectfully, it's no trouble at all. Lang Jun is my Lang Jun's good friend. This is what I should do. Feng Jin had no choice but to return to the carriage. Han Yu was playing with the jade tassel hanging from his waist with his fingers. Are you not at home? Feng Jin nodded. He thought for a moment and said, since you are here, why don't you go to Yaoji? Yaoji? Another strange name. It seemed that Huayu had made a lot of good friends while he was away from Shangjing. Feng Jin saw the confusion in his eyes and explained, Yaoji is my good friend. Her name is Lu Heng and she is also Lanting's cousin. Han Yu said bluntly, since I have nothing to do, I might as well go there. Feng Jin shook his head with a bitter smile at Han Yu's attitude. With Wenbin's temperament, if he encountered any setbacks in the future, he would suffer a lot. Jiang Pingji didn't come back until an hour before the city gate was locked. She rode a tall horse and slowly returned to the Lu's house. As soon as she came back, she heard from the gatekeeper that Feng Jin had come to see her. Huayu? Jiang Pingji asked, did he leave any other message? The gatekeeper thought for a moment and shook his head. Lang Jun only asked me to tell you that he had been here. He didn't say anything else. Oh, I see. Jiang Pingji felt relieved. It seemed that it was a normal visit and he didn't encounter any difficulties. But the gatekeeper hesitated. What? The gatekeeper stammered, the one who often goes with Feng Langjun has come to see you again. Jiang Pingji tried not to think too much. What did he mean by, always goes with Feng Jin? It felt like there was an affair going on between them. Did you say that Wuma Jun came again today? Since the last time at Ingchun House, the frequency of Wuma Jun's visits was frighteningly high. But Jiang Pingji often went out, so she didn't run into him. The gatekeeper said awkwardly, yes, I heard from other servants. He seems to want to marry the second Nyangzi. What? Marry the second Nyangzi of the Lu's house? Jiang Pingji was stunned for a while. Then she remembered that there was a sister who had never shown her face in the Lu's house. However, her stepsister was not even 9 years old this year, right? Didn't Wuma Jun want to marry Jingxian? Why did he change his target to his sister of a concubine? Or could it be that this person wanted both of them? Jiang Pingji's eyes turned cold. She pursed her lips and looked extremely unhappy. After returning to the house, she went straight to see Lu Shi. He was reading some documents seriously. Lanting, you're here. Lu Shi put the book aside and smiled. Sit next to me. Jiang Pingji asked directly, Father, what do you mean? If Lu Shi had not hinted or misled Wuma Jun, he wouldn't have known that there was a daughter of a mistress in the Lu's house. For some reason, although the siblings were in the house, they were scarily invisible in the eyes of others. It was obvious that someone had done it on purpose. Lu Shi asked, what? There is a rumor in the world that Wuma Jun wants to marry my sister. Lu Shi said, it's not a rumor. I did agree to it. Jiang Pingji. Lanting, I swore in front of your mother's grave, Lu Shi said. I won't let those who hurt her and this family live a good life. But my sister, Lu Shi said meaningfully, I only have your mother in my life. Jiang Pingji suddenly understood. The children in the house were not Lu Shi's biological children. If that was the case, she couldn't help but look at Lu Shi's head. Chapter 200. Father, you mean? My sister, Jiang Pingji withdrew her gaze. She did not want to be too obvious and hurt his dignity as a man. It's just a grudge between the previous generation. I'll tell you in detail when everything is settled. Lu Shi caressed her hair and said gently, you don't have to listen to the intrigues in the backyard. You don't want to dirty your ears and change your temperament. Did you agree to marry my sister to Wuma Jun to avenge my mother? Jiang Pingji asked. At the same time, she was deep in thought. If that was the case, there must be something special about this stepsister's identity. Yes, it's a very important part. Lu Shi's lips curled into a sinister smile. It was as if there was a cold lake deep in his eyes. I wanted to wait a few more years, but Wuma Jun came to me on his own. He must have some ulterior motive. I'd like to see his expression when he finds out the truth. It'll be interesting. She killed Ah Min for her own ambition. She should pay the price. She asked, "Who killed my mother?" Lu Shi did not answer her. He sighed and said, "I told you. It's a grudge between the previous generation. I don't want you to be involved. I know where your ambition lies. The world is vast, and that is your goal. I, your father, will settle the score for your mother." But Jiang Pingji felt that things were not that simple. Lu Shi was hiding an important truth. "If you want to do something for your mother, then promise me." As Lu Shi spoke, he leaned forward and whispered in her ear word by word. It was as if he was making a solemn vow. "Don't let anyone get their hands on the throne of the world. You can only win. You can't lose." Jiang Pingji's heart skipped a beat. Even though Lu Shi had learned some things from Master Liaochen, it was the first time he told her that she had to win. She asked in a low voice, "Will the person who killed my mother fight with me?" Lu Shi couldn't give a very clear answer to this question because he didn't know the details. The only thing he could say was, "I don't know, but if you want to be the ruler of the world, it won't be wrong. Who cares if she will fight with you? She won't be able to beat you. Just remember today's conversation in your heart. Even if you are talking in your sleep at night, you must not leak even half a word. You must not leak anything." Even though Jiang Pingji didn't mind Lu Shi's serious advice, she had to take it seriously. "What's more?" Lu Shi smiled sarcastically. "How could someone who only knows how to suck up to you compete with you? What could she rely on? Tossing and turning men's bodies, seductively asking for sex. It's the biggest joke in the world. A woman." Jiang Pingji was surprised. She thought Lu Shi wanted to deal with a man. Lu Shi obviously didn't want to talk about this topic anymore. His daughter was too cunning. The more he talked, the more information he would leak. Before the situation became clear, he didn't want to dig up the past. Lu Shi wouldn't be worried if she was getting stronger. But now, it was clear that it was still not in its infancy. It still needed to recuperate and accumulate its foundation. Lu Shi was in no hurry. He had waited for so many years, and he didn't mind waiting longer. As long as he could see that woman's head fall to the ground before he died, everything would be worth it. "Your sister's matter is settled then." Lu Shi's voice was calm, but there was a hint of chilling pleasure in it. Jiang Pingji was not a compassionate person. Lu Shi had already hinted that his sister had a special identity. If she continued to speak up for her, it would seem a little stupid. But didn't father say that Wuma Jun and Jingxian? Could it be that he wants to enjoy the bliss of having two wives? Lu Shi said, "Let him worry about it." In any case, Wuma Jun would not let his stepsister become his concubine. It was even more impossible for the daughter of the Wei family's first wife to become his concubine. Naturally, Wuma Jun had to cancel the marriage. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to leave Hejin County alive. On one hand, he promised Lu Shi to marry his daughter, but on the other, he wanted to take Wei Jingxian's engagement. Wasn't he courting death? But, "Father, Jingxian and I have broken off our engagement. The Wei family is interested in marrying Wuma Jun." Although they didn't say it officially, some well-informed people know about it. Now that Wuma Jun has changed his mind. Doesn't the Wei residents have any objections? Lu Shi was a little surprised. He did not expect his daughter, who had been so insensitive before, to think about this. Don't worry. It's just gossip. The Wei residents did not admit it. They just need to say that others guessed wrongly. Lu Shi smiled and said, have you forgotten that there was another person at the gathering other than Wuma Jun, who was of equal status and had a brighter future? You mean Feng Jin? Jiang Pingji thought of her good friend. Feng Jin is the second son of the Feng family. His father is the head of the Imperial Secretariat, Feng Ren. He comes from a noble family. Isn't he better than a prince who is not favored and feared by the government? It is said that the daughter of the Wei family should be married to someone of high status. The daughter of the Wei family is barely a match for him. Jiang Pingji did not expect such a plot twist. Will it work? It's in the bag, Lu Shi said calmly. Marriage is about matching two surnames. If it is fated, it will happen naturally. Jiang Pingji was speechless. But you are on good terms with Feng Jin. If he really marries the daughter of the Wei family, it may affect the relationship between you two. No matter how they broke off the engagement, Wei Jingxian would always be labeled as Lu Shi's ex-fiancé. Feng Jin knew that their relationship was pure, but a man's mentality would always be a little stiff. Especially when Feng Jin and Lu Shi had more contact in the future. They would visit each other and Lu Shi would see the married Wei Jingxian. He was afraid that Feng Jin would think too much. Jiang Pingji only wanted to touch her forehead and say, how overthinking. This was not the era where everyone was gay. Seeing two people of the same sex getting along well, one could speculate that they were in an impure relationship. Lu Shi did not know that Feng Jin had long known that Jiang Pingji was a girl. Anyone who married Wei Jingxian would feel disgusted, but Feng Jin would not. Jiang Pingji said with certainty, that won't happen. Huayu is not an ordinary man. She was not worried that Feng Jin would feel disgusted, but she was worried that Wei Jingxian would. If the two of them were fated to be husband and wife, she would have to keep a distance from Feng Jin. She could not cause a family conflict, could she? But for now, she did not have to worry too much. Nothing was set in stone yet. Lu Shi praised, Feng Huayu is indeed not simple. It was a pity that the son of the Feng family was destined to not be on the same path as his daughter. Chapter 201. Lu Heng and Feng Jin were friends. In the past, when they met, they would talk about everything under the sun, or exchange opinions on politics. Now, they had another topic to discuss, Lu Heng's cousin, Feng Jin's good friend, Lu Lanting. The former had a secret brother complex, while the latter admired Jiang Pingji and treated her as a best friend. They had a lot to talk about. At first, Han Yu was just listening to them out of boredom. But after a while, he became more interested in the Lanting they were talking about. When Lu Heng heard Feng Jin say that Han Yu was Master Yuanjing's disciple, he couldn't help but be in awe. He looked at Han Yu with even more enthusiasm. His cousin was going to Langyi to study. If he could find out Master Yuanjing's preferences earlier, it might come in handy. With this in mind, Lu Heng tried to get more information from Feng Jin. Han Yu's lips curled into a smile, and he gave Feng Jin a meaningful look. Feng Jin smiled bitterly. He guessed that this was probably what Lanting meant by Brother Khan. Lu Heng had good intentions. He would just pretend that he didn't see it. I can understand that Yaoji loves her brother. It's just that teacher has already taken in his full number of disciples. I'm afraid he won't be taking in any more. Han Yu shook his head regretfully and said, but Langyi Academy still welcomes you. If you go to Langyi in the future, you can be my classmate. This time, Feng Jin, who was watching from the side, was surprised. Already full. Master Yuanjing has found the fourth person he has been looking for. This time, it was Lu Heng's turn to be confused. Why couldn't he understand what these two were saying? Feng Jin could not help but sigh when he saw that she was still puzzled. Yaoji, there's something you don't know. When Master Yuanjing took back the 3 cities and returned to Langya County, he performed a divination for himself. He was destined to have 4 disciples. A few years ago, I heard that you had already accepted 3 disciples. I thought that with Lanting's talent, he would be the 4th disciple that you're looking for. I didn't expect that you already have one. In terms of students, all the students in Langyi Academy could be considered as Yuanjing's students. However, there could only be 4 real disciples. Lu Heng's face was filled with disappointment. Although he belittled his cousin, he was still very proud of him. How could a student and a personal disciple be the same? For the former, Master Yuanjing only came out to give lectures occasionally, but for the latter, he taught everything he knew. AI. Lu Heng sighed, and then said somewhat open-mindedly, if I get it, it's my fortune. If I don't, it's my fate. However, I heard from Huaiyu that Master Yuanjing was painstakingly looking for his 4th disciple. This is really puzzling. He emphasized the word diligently. With Master Yuanjing's fame and talent, which scholar in the world would not go after him? Too many students had racked their brains just to meet Master Yuanjing. If they could be accepted as his disciple, it would be a blessing to their ancestors. Would Master Yuanjing still need to search for him? Simply absurd. However, he was not so sure after observing Feng Jin and Han Yu's expressions. Han Yu said, I had recommended Huaiyu to Master, but Master said that Huaiyu had another destiny in life and he was not fated to be with him. Master Yuanjing had a quirk when it came to accepting disciples. Not only did he want the disciple to be smart and have a temperament that suited his taste, but he was also particular about mysterious fate. Just as Lu Heng thought, after Master Yuanjing became famous, there were countless people who wanted to be his direct disciple. He could choose any outstanding talent in the world. What kind of student couldn't he find? Han Yu also wanted to give it a try, but he did not expect that Master Yuanjing would take the initiative to accept a disciple. After entering the sect, he had seen too many people who were praised by Master Yuanjing, but all of them failed at the last stage. They had another destiny and were not fated to be Master Yuanjing's disciple. To hell with the fate of master and disciple. If you don't accept disciples, how can there be the fate of master and disciple? Master Yuanjing only smiled and did not say anything about this resentment. He never explained anything. The first 3 disciples were accepted smoothly, but the last one had been hanging around for many years. He thought he could not find him anymore. Feng Jin was curious. Although Master Yuanjing's criteria for accepting a disciple were a little strange, and the last one was even more inexplicable, he could tell how much he valued this matter. The first 3 disciples were accepted quickly, but the last one was not easy to accept. Feng Jin was indeed curious. I don't know who the 4th disciple is. I remember that Wenbin wrote to me last time that Master Yuanjing was quite troubled about accepting disciples. Now that we met, he told me that the candidate has already been selected. I can't help but be curious. Speaking of the 4th disciple, Han Yu was also confused. He had not understood his master's intention. I have told Huaiyu about this person before. There are many young talents in Langyi Academy, and Master Yuanjing's disciples are among the best. There is only one person who is an exception. Han Yu frowned slightly. When I first arrived at Langyi County, I thought that person should be Master Yuanjing's disciple. Later, I found out that he was not. Not only was he not even a student of Langyi Academy, but Master Yuanjing specially allowed him to study here. Feng Jin thought for a while and suddenly remembered, the person you're talking about is the one with an unknown birth date and a very bad fate. Lu Heng was confused. What unknown birth date and a very bad fate? Han Yu nodded and said, that's him. Feng Jin was surprised. That person has been studying in Langyi Academy for 7 or 8 years. If Master Yuanjing had accepted him earlier, he would have been his first disciple. Why didn't he accept him for 7 or 8 years and only accepted him when it was almost time? Han Yu also asked his master about this question, and his master smiled meaningfully. Timing. Han Yu said, Master Yuanjing said that the timing was not right before, but now it is time. Feng Jin was speechless. Many famous teachers had quirks, and Master Yuanjing was definitely one of them. Lu Heng had to interrupt and asked, after listening to you for so long, I still don't know who the lucky person is. Wei Ci. After Master Yuanjing accepted him as a disciple, he named him Zixiao, Han Yu answered. Wei Ci. Wei Zixiao. He had never heard of him. Lu Heng searched for relevant memories, but there was no trace of this person. Then, why did you say that his birth date is unknown and a very bad fate? Lu Heng had a bad habit. If he didn't understand, he would want to ask. If he didn't ask clearly, his heart would itch uncomfortably. Han Yu's expression froze. It seemed that he was having a hard time talking about it. Lu Heng thought that Han Yu had encountered a problem. His heart skipped a beat, and he quickly said, I am presumptuous. Please forgive me, Wenbin. Han Yu shook his head and said softly, there is no taboo. I am just afraid that others will have unnecessary fear and scruples toward Zixiao if I say it. The people of the world are ignorant and fear ghosts and gods. Just a small date of birth can create so many tricks, it is really a pity for Zixiao. If it weren't for Wei Ci's good luck, he might have been strangled to death by his family and thrown into the wilderness when he was born. Lu Heng heard this and didn't continue to ask. If he had asked, Han Yu might have told him, but it was not a gentleman's behavior to join in the fun. Chapter 202. Although he didn't see Lu Lanting, who was praised by Feng Jin, Lu Heng had left a good impression on Han Yu. Hey, Fourth Langjun is back. Feng Jin and Han Yu came back together. They opened the curtain and saw a carriage parked in front of them. It was the carriage that Wuma Jun had taken during the day. What a coincidence. Wenbin and I got off at the same time. Obviously, Wuma Jun had also noticed it. He was unhappy to see Feng Jin stepping on the stool and another person in the carriage. Wuma Jun didn't like Feng Jin's family background. Feng Jin wasn't a member of the royal family. What right did he have to live a better life than him? What right did he have to be more talented and outstanding than him? Although he was polite to Feng Jin on the surface, he didn't respect him that much. However, when Han Yu stepped on the stool and came out of the carriage, Wuma Jun's unhappiness disappeared instantly. He put on a faint smile, as if his previous carelessness and disgust didn't exist. Unfortunately, neither Feng Jin nor Han Yu were easy to deal with. To put it bluntly, among the three of them, except for Wuma Jun, whose acting skills were a bit bad, the other two were going to be best actors in the future. Before Wuma Jun could say anything, Feng Jin introduced Han Yu after greeting him. This is my good friend. His surname is Han, and his name is Yu. He is Master Yuanjing's disciple. Feng Jin emphasized the words, Master Yuanjing's disciple, hinting that Wuma Jun shouldn't be so embarrassed that he couldn't move when he saw a beauty. Fortunately, Wuma Jun wasn't hopeless. He immediately withdrew his eager eyes and adopted a reserved plan. Taking a step back in order to advance, he could first establish a good relationship with them. Yes, in this era of masculinity, men might not be completely safe. Han Yu saw the eagerness in Wuma Jun's eyes. He felt a chill in his heart. The hair on his arm stood up and he got goosebumps. He suddenly regretted agreeing to Feng Jin's request. Wuma Jun obviously didn't care about men and women. He didn't want to get himself involved. Thinking of this, Han Yu came up with a plan in his mind. He slowly revealed a sneer. However, in Wuma Jun's eyes, it was a stunning beauty who was satisfied with him. He had to admit that it was a big misunderstanding. It made Han Yu feel nauseous. Wuma Jun didn't like Feng Jin, but he didn't like Feng Jin being out of his control either, so he asked about his schedule. Feng Jin smiled faintly. He dealt with it flawlessly, and Wuma Jun could not find any mistakes. Fourth Lang Jun, have you made any progress in visiting the Lu residence today? How could Feng Jin not see that the other party was trying his best to hide it? If it wasn't for the fact that he still had some brains, he would have already flown into the sky. He must have encountered something good. Wuma Jun had already determined that Feng Jin had the intention of relying on him, so he did not hide anything from him. He revealed that Lu Shi had already relented and intended to betroth his daughter to him. Although she was only a concubine's daughter, she had a good father, money, and food. At the thought of Hu County, Wuma Jun's heart began to beat faster. It was as if he could already see Lu Shi helping him ascend the throne. When Feng Jin heard that, he almost dropped the cup in his hand and spilled some tea. Wuma Jun and Han Yu were quite surprised. It was normal for others to lose their composure, but how could Feng Jin lose his composure? Unbelievable. Han Yu smiled and closed his eyes to hide the surging speculation in his eyes. Could it be that the Lu family's daughter and Feng Jin had some unspeakable feelings for each other? Otherwise, according to Feng Jin's self-restraint, it was impossible for him to lose his composure so obviously. Wuma Jun did not think of that, and Feng Jin, the person involved, felt even more wronged. He just did not react for a moment and thought that Lu Shi had agreed to marry Lu Shi. Thinking about it, Jiang Pingji, who was such an unbearable person, married Wuma Jun like a daughter. He did not even dare to think about it. The scene was too beautiful. Feng Jin was shocked by his own speculation, and that was why he lost his composure. He quickly realized that the Lu family's daughter that Wuma Jun mentioned should be the concubine's daughter, who had almost no presence in the Lu residence. If so, I have to congratulate Fourth Lang Jun for getting his wish and bringing home the beauty. Feng Jin smiled frankly. There was no trace of hidden displeasure on his face, which made Han Yu, who was secretly observing him, confused again. However, I heard that the Lu family's daughter is not even 9 years old yet. When she is at the age of engagement, hee. I am afraid that Fourth Lang Jun will have to wait for a long time. Wuma Jun also knew his daughter's age, but did it matter? Not to mention that she was only 9 years old, even if she was 9 months old, he would agree to the marriage. He did not have the capital to win over Lu Shi. That old fox was too cunning. He had tried to fool him for a few days, but he had been fooled by him. If he became Lu Shi's son-in-law, they would be in a natural alliance. Even if Lu Shi did not support him, he would not support anyone else. Moreover, she was Lu Shi's only daughter, so there was no reason for Lu Shi to not care about her. Ordinary princes did not have to lower themselves like Wuma Jun did. However, who asked him to be in an awkward position? If he did not find a way to fight for it, he would not be able to make a comeback for the rest of his life. It doesn't matter. I will just marry her and respect her. Yes, it didn't matter to Wuma Jun. He wanted to marry the daughter of Lu Shi, not that person. If he married her, he would worship her as a shrine. He could not stop him from being a playboy, not to mention that she was not married yet. Seeing his attitude, Feng Jin sneered in his heart. He thought that Jiang Pingji had seen through Wu Majun's nature. Who would feel at ease if their daughter married to him? He had just reached an agreement with Lu Shi to be his son-in-law, and now he was coveting Wen Bin's beauty. What a scumbag. Wu Majun wanted to talk to Han Yu through the night, but Han Yu's IQ and literature were much higher than his. There was nothing to talk about. I am surprised. Wu Majun is so lustful. Why have I not seen him do anything to you after so many days of following him? Han Yu had nothing to talk about with Wu Majun, but he had endless things to talk about with his good friend, Feng Jin, so they decided to share a room. Feng Jin said helplessly, "My beauty is like a jade pearl on a plate. How can I compete with Wen Bin's beauty?" Han Yu was speechless. It was not the Feng Jin he knew who would say such sarcastic words. Who taught him to praise others in the open but to insult others in the dark? Jiang Pingji thought that Feng Jin was being sarcastic. Was it her fault? Han Yu did not want to show any weakness. He teased. Wu Majun mentioned that he was going to be engaged to the daughter of the Lu family. Why did you lose your composure? Chapter 203. Seeing that Feng Jin wanted to deny it, Han Yu pursed his lips and smiled. Don't play dumb, Huai Yu. How can you deny it? Feng Jin knew his friend's temperament. He knew that if he didn't give an explanation today, Han Yu wouldn't let him sleep all night. Feng Jin thought of a perfect excuse and explained calmly, "A few days ago, I met Chief Lu by chance and knew that he was a gentle and generous elder." Do you think Chief Lu couldn't see through Wu Majun's treacherous thoughts? If he had seen through it, why did he agree to marry his daughter to Wu Majun? This, to put it bluntly, isn't it like pushing his own blood relatives into the fire pit? Yes, both he and Feng Jin could see through Wu Majun's disguise. There was no reason that someone like Chief Lu couldn't see through it. Moreover, Huai Yu had said that Chief Lu was a gentle and family-oriented person in private. How could he not care about his only daughter's marriage? So, that's why you lost your composure. Han Yu squinted his eyes. It seemed that he still had doubts about Feng Jin's words. Feng Jin said seriously, "Otherwise. The daughter of the Lu family is not even 9 years old, and I will be married in 2 years. What kind of relationship could there be? Besides, the daughter of the Lu family has been raised in the boudoir since she was a child. She rarely goes out. Even her brother, Lanting, rarely sees her. How could I, a man outside, have any relationship with her? It's okay that you are a playboy, but how could you slander the innocence of a noble girl?" Han Yu lost interest and sat on the side of the bed sulkily. He changed the topic and asked, "If so, according to what Huai Yu said, why did Chief Lu do this?" Feng Jin couldn't figure it out either, but he was secretly relieved. Han Yu was not easy to deal with. He would be finished if he gave himself away. Feng Jin shook his head in confusion. "Well, I don't understand either. I think Chief Lu has other considerations. How could a man with a generous and family-oriented temperament, as well as extremely sharp judgment and experience, not see through Wu Majun's clumsy disguise? It didn't make sense at all. Unless there was a compelling reason that made Chief Lu act in this way." Han Yu's face was filled with the word "interested," but Feng Jin was not curious at all. Whether Lu Shi married his daughter or not was his family's business. Why should two unrelated men get involved? As usual, Feng Jin read a book in front of the lamp for a while. When he felt a little sleepy, he decided to go to bed. As soon as he lay down, Han Yu said, "I hope it won't involve politics. County Chief Lu's methods are a little creepy." Feng Jin was secretly amused. County Chief Lu is such a character. If it's not for the sake of the imperial court, could it be for a personal grudge? What kind of logic was it to marry the son he had raised for a few years to Wu Ma Jun just because of a personal grudge? Han Yu couldn't figure out Lu Shi's intentions. Forget it. My head hurts if I think too much. The two of them talked about their daily lives and learned about the things that had happened to each other over the years. They couldn't help but sigh. All of a sudden, Han Yu remembered Master Yuanjing's worries. Mister has been rather worried recently. The aristocratic families have already flourished to such an extent. If we don't restrain ourselves, I'm afraid something bad will happen. Both of them were still awake and were chatting to pass the time. Feng Jin sneered, rein at the precipice. How could they do that? It wasn't that no one had realized this problem. The point was that the aristocratic families were like a carriage that was slipping down the slope and they couldn't control it anymore. If the future ruler of the world is also a member of the aristocratic families, maybe we can continue our glory. But what if he isn't? Even if he is a member of the aristocratic families, who can tolerate the royal family being controlled by the aristocratic families? Or even lower than them? The aristocratic families have crossed the line. Han Yu was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect Feng Jin to have such a bold idea. However, Han Yu couldn't refute Feng Jin's words. Nowadays, the royal family of Dongqing was the Wuma family, but the real helmsman was the four aristocratic families. Which of the important positions in each province and county wasn't from the aristocratic families? How many children of poor families were there? Dongqing had always emphasized culture and restrained martial arts. Their military was weak and almost all of them were lost in the battlefield in the north borderline. If the aristocratic families didn't agree, the emperor's order couldn't even be passed out of the Shangyang palace. Wasn't the royal family afraid of those aristocratic families? Afraid? Of course they were afraid. Who would feel comfortable if they had the world but couldn't enjoy the supreme power? However, the royal family of Dongqing had gradually fallen into a disadvantageous position in the open and secret battle with the aristocratic families. They couldn't be majestic at all. Fortunately, the interests of the aristocratic families weren't united. Each had their own conflicts. The royal family of Dongqing was also in a strange balance. They were muddle-headed in front of the royal family and kept thinking about taking back the power. They kept playing dirty tricks. As the legitimate son of the Feng family, it was not easy for Feng Jin to see the drawbacks so clearly. I didn't think about it before, but, after I came to Hejin and met County Chief Lu, I was suddenly enlightened. It was as if the fog in front of him was blown away by the wind, and he saw the truth. The chaos in Hu County was caused by natural disasters and sabotage, but the sabotage was greater than the natural disasters. Why did County Chief Lu persevere and even manage Hu County to its current state when others were troublesome and even lost their lives? While others were fawning over Lu Shi, few were willing to delve into the meaning of the problem. Was it because they didn't want to? Or was it because they didn't dare to? Lu Shi didn't exterminate the gentry in Hu County, and their lives weren't as easy as they used to be. They lived in fear and didn't dare to go overboard under Lu Shi's watch. But, would that be enough to prevent future troubles? Not necessarily. County Chief Lu has been promoted to the General Evaluation Officer. I think there will be other changes. For example, he will be promoted to the governor on the surface, but in fact, it will be to take Hu County from him. Do you know how many people are drooling over Hu County? If Lu Shi is no longer the county chief, or if he passes away and Hu County has a new governor, what do you think will happen to Hu County? Han Yu's mouth was dry. He didn't have to think to know the answer. Hu County was like a lamb that Lu Shi had carefully raised. It slowly grew up, became fat, and the wool on its body was thicker. Around it, there were countless greedy eyes staring at it. Once Lu Shi, the shepherd, was distracted or simply not around, the fat lamb would be plucked by the greedy demonic eye. Those who had a bit of foresight would probably keep the lamb and pluck it when it grew some hair. If the greedy people who couldn't wait for the wool to grow, they would probably kill the fat lamb. Han Yu said, in the end, County Chief Lu still cared about his identity as an aristocratic family, so he didn't kill all the aristocratic families to avoid future troubles. Their reason told them that it was best to kill all the aristocratic families, but they were all from aristocratic families. If the same problem was put in front of them, they would probably make the same decision as Lu Shi, or even a little softer. Han Yu frowned slightly. It seemed that he didn't like this heavy topic. What made him even more unhappy was that he knew he couldn't avoid this conflict in the future. Unless he was willing to give up all his knowledge and live in seclusion, no matter what happened outside. But was it possible? Chapter 204. Perhaps it was because he had something on his mind, he didn't fall asleep until the middle of the night. Then, he woke up on time according to his biological clock. The next day. Seeing Wuma Jun, Feng Jin said, "I'm afraid I can't stay in Hejian for more than 2 days." Wuma Jun was stunned. He didn't know how Feng Jin knew what he was thinking. Wasn't it simple? Wuma Jun stayed in Hejian to win the support of the aristocratic families. Now that he had the support of Lu Shi, the other aristocratic families didn't need to be so anxious. Instead of staying in Hejian County, it was better to visit the Wang family in Langyi. 4th Lang Jun, I hope you can make an exception and let me say goodbye to my friend Lanting and tell her that we will meet in Langyi in the future. Wuma Jun was happy to see that happen. He already regarded Lu Shi as his father-in-law, so Jiang Pingji was naturally his brother-in-law. Feng Jin was his right-hand man, so it was beneficial for Wuma Jun to build a good relationship with his future brother-in-law. Feng Jin and Han Yu saw all the changes in his emotions. Both of them felt disdain and contempt at the same time. They were not afraid of being stupid, but they were afraid of being stupid and blind. Wuma Jun had already regarded Feng Jin as an aide and a subordinate that he could order around. That was ridiculous. What did Wuma Jun do to deserve Feng Jin's loyalty? However, they didn't say anything. They just went out together. One wanted to say goodbye to his new friend, and the other wanted to see what the legendary Lu Lanting looked like. They were lucky that Jiang Pingji didn't run around, but if they came a little later, she would have gone out too. Han Yu got out of the carriage and was about to step on the stool when he saw a familiar figure standing next to Feng Jin. They were talking happily. Han Yu was speechless. His eyes fell on Jiang Pingji's feet, which were wearing socks and wooden clogs. The scene from the day before flashed in his mind. Jiang Pingji had already noticed him when Han Yu was looking at her. It wasn't that she had sharp eyes and ears, but the enthusiasm in the streaming room had almost blown the roof off. Nongfu Shangquan Yudi Angshuan, ah, ah, ah. I watched the streaming video on Baidu yesterday. I thought it was a pity, but I didn't expect to see him in person. I was so excited that I wanted to shake his hand. It must be very smooth. Jiang Pingji sneered in her heart when she saw the bullet screen. Even though she was watching the live stream, there was still a screen between them. Dream on. Bayan Huakai, no. Host, give the handsome young man a close-up, magnified close-up. I want to take a screenshot and use it as a mural. He wasn't even dead yet, and they were already planning to hang him on the wall. Jiang Pingji ridiculed every bullet on the screen. She secretly glanced at Han Yu and found that he was also looking at her. Feet, Fei Shuang Dian Mo, I'm a newbie in the live broadcast room. I heard that the streamer can see through a person's underwear at first sight. Then, do you know the size of this handsome young man? What is your 3 measurements? I think his fingers are so beautiful. They would be perfect for playing the piano. Jiang Pingji almost laughed when she saw the bullet screen. If the other party hadn't reminded her, she would have forgotten about it. Host V, this young man is indeed very good-looking, but if you think about the image of him taking off his pants to go to the toilet, or the image of him having constipation, I don't think he's so fairy-like. This kid has been suffering from excessive internal heat recently, and it's not good for his bowels. The audience in the live broadcast room, Jiang Pingji thought she could entertain herself by ruining other people's enjoyment of beauty. Host V, as for his size, I think the girl who has used him has the most right to speak. He's young, but he's already experienced a lot. He has 2 concubines who warm his bed. He's not messy, but he's not clean by the standards of your world. Jiang Pingji turned Han Yu's background upside down in the streaming room. Everyone looked at Han Yu and felt that he was a handsome, fairy-like young man. But when they saw the bullet screen that the streamer posted, they felt that it hurt their eyes. Streamer, why are you so cruel? Can't you just let them lick the handsome young man in peace? Xian, it hurts my eyes when I imagine the handsome young man squatting in the toilet with a conflicted face. Nongfu Shanquan Yudiangshuan, hurts my eyes +1. The streamer is really a veteran in the field of teaching people tirelessly. Jiang Pingji could tease the audience in the live broadcast room, but it was impossible for her to say what she said before. If she had a grudge against Han Yu, she wouldn't be merciful with her words. But now it seemed that Feng Jin's friend obviously knew Han Yu, so she couldn't tease him rudely. Feng Jin noticed the weird atmosphere between Jiang Pingji and Han Yu, and a guess came to his mind. Could it be that the 2 of you have already met? Jiang Pingji laughed in her heart. Yes, more than just met. Han Yu also laughed secretly. What a small world. Before I entered the city yesterday, I met Lu Langjun and had a brief conversation with him. Feng Jin was overjoyed and said, I guess it's fate. Jiang Pingji laughed. Doomed fate. However, it was just the beginning. There were surprises everywhere in life. For example, when Feng Jin introduced Han Yu's courtesy name to her, Jiang Pingji was strangely silent. She stared at Han Yu, as if she wanted to see through the layers of clothes and see through him. Han Yu subconsciously took a step back and said reluctantly, Lu Langjun, is there something wrong with my appearance? No, it's very neat. Jiang Pingji added, Wenbin, do you know a man named Xing Yumo? Jiang Pingji had never thought that the man her father recommended to marry into her family would appear in front of her. It was fate. Han Yu was confused and asked, Lu Langjun, have you heard of Yumo? Jiang Pingji didn't answer but asked back, so, Wei Zixiao does exist? Han Yu then realized that there was something wrong with Jiang Pingji's words. Lu Langjun has never heard of them, so how do you know about them? I once dreamed that there was a fairy in the Jasper Lake. There was a fairy beauty taking a bath and burning incense. I wanted to go closer to ask her, but I heard someone call her Zixiao. The beauty answered and called him Yumo. Hearing the voice, I knew that the fairy was a man. Jiang Pingji described it vividly as if she had really had the dream. Both Feng Jin and Han Yu were stunned. However, the audience in the streaming room couldn't buy it. After all, they already knew how bad Jiang Pingji was. They would never be fooled. Lu Siji Lianming, I feel sorry for the confused young Feng Jin and Han Yu. They have been tricked by the streamer. Nongfu Shanquan Yudiangshuan, sorry +1. Who would call their partners by their full names? The loophole in Jiang Pingji's story was that she accurately called out Qing Yumo and Wei Zixiao's surnames. If they really knew their names from a dream, they couldn't call each other by their full names, could they? So, it was possible to know their first names, but not their surnames. Chapter 205. If that's the case, you also saw me in your dreams? Hanyu asked with a faint smile. He looked friendly, but there was a hint of judgment in his eyes. Who would believe such nonsense? Yes, another loophole in Jiang Pingji's story was that there was another person in it, Hanyu. If you paid attention, you would notice that she asked Qing Yumo and Wei Zixiao in surprise after hearing Hanyu's courtesy name. If the story was not contradictory, then Hanyu should have appeared in her dream. Otherwise, she must have made it up. Jiang Pingji thought that Hanyu would be ashamed, but he nodded. Yes. It's a pity that the dream was hazy. I could only see the silhouette but not the face. I thought it was just a dream, but I didn't expect it to be real. The viewers in the streaming room were amazed by Jiang Pingji's acting skills. Jinchuan Kunliangliang, I only admire the streamer's acting skills. She did it all in one take. It was such nonsense, but even she herself believed it. Life is like a drama. Even the streamer can win an Oscar if she depends on her acting skills. Chiofeng Cici, Oscar is nothing. No matter how good the best actor and best actress are, can they be 100% in character all day? Nongfu Shangquan Yudiangshuan, well, I know the streamer is lying, but she said it so confidently that I am beginning to doubt her. Even the viewers in the streaming room began to doubt their own judgment, let alone Hanyu who didn't know much about her. Hanyu's mouth twitched. He said in a stiff tone, so, it is fate that I met Lanting. Jiang Pingji readily accepted his advice and said, yes, such a fate, it will be a good story to tell. Feng Jin believed her and said with surprise, people say that what you think about in the day is what you dream about at night. But Lanting was born and grew up in Hejian County. She had never heard of the names of Wen Bin and the other two. Wei Zixiao's courtesy name was only recently given. Lanting could actually dream of such a scene. Maybe it was a sign of fate. If I go to Langyi in the future, I might be able to meet my dream friend. Hanyu was still doubtful, but he was more convinced after hearing what Feng Jin said. Although this speech was a little dreamy and romantic, it couldn't ignore the bigger picture. Let's rewind and take a look at what Jiang Pingji said. She saw a fairy beauty bathing and burning incense in the Jasper Lake. She wanted to go closer to ask, but she heard someone call her Zixiao. The beauty responded and called him friend Mo. In other words, the background was the bathtub. She was taking a bath. Hanyu couldn't imagine it. Zixiao was taking a bath in his dream. What was he doing in his dream? Although Lu Shi was a young boy who had yet to grow up, and the scene in the dream was still hazy, she could only vaguely make out the silhouettes of people. She shouldn't be able to see anything out of place, but she still felt that it was a little strange. Jiang Pingji took advantage of the fact that her body was still young, so she asked Hanyu. That person called Yumo really has a good temper. He's cautious and thorough in his work. He's honest and upright. Hanyu was deep in thought and replied subconsciously, of course. Yumo has a good temperament, and he is cautious and reliable. Master speaks highly of him. When he finished, he came back to his senses. He was more and more convinced of what Jiang Pingji said in the dream. Why did he believe it? Qing Yumo was a nobody among all the students. He kept a low profile and his presence was almost non-existent. Except for a few close friends who knew about his talent and temperament, other strangers didn't know much about Qing Yumo, let alone Jiang Pingji who was far away in Hejian County. But she could accurately point out Yumo's temperament and his biggest advantage. It was obvious that there was a basis for it. Now Hanyu was interested in Jiang Pingji's dream. He couldn't care less about the little knot in his heart. So, that Wei Zixiao. Jiang Pingji suddenly smiled and asked, is he really as beautiful as a beautiful woman? Han Yu was trying to listen to what she had to say. But he almost choked on his own saliva. He was being rude in front of others. Feng Jin was also speechless. Jiang Pingji looked like she was seriously asking for advice, which made it impossible for him to be annoyed. Han Yu said, "Didn't you say that you didn't see his face?" Jiang Pingji put on an "I'm very innocent" expression. "I didn't see his face, but I heard Wenbin tease him. He said that he accidentally left a sachet when he went out and it was found by a merchant. He took the sachet and asked the matchmaker to propose marriage. I think if he wasn't much more beautiful than a woman, he wouldn't have been mistaken for his gender." Jiang Pingji was the one who was lying through her teeth. But it had been a lie for so long that most of the viewers in the streaming room believed it. Nongfu Shangquan Yudiangshuan, ha ha ha, I don't know how traumatized he was when he was mistaken for a woman. Kalwa Yi, I've been watching the streaming for a few days. I realize that the men in this world are a bit effeminate. They have flowers in their hair and powdered their hair. They are gentle and beautiful. If they look more androgynous, they will be easily mistaken for a man. The traumatized area should be infinite, right? Han Yu's white cheeks were a bit flushed. He seemed to be a bit nervous. You can't answer this question. If you see him one day and spill the beans, you will be the one to suffer. He shook his head decisively and kept the question a secret. But, Han Yu said, but what you said about Zixiao being teased in the dream might happen. But Zixiao doesn't like others to pay too much attention to his appearance. He always says that the appearance is given to him by his parents. Children can't choose whether they are beautiful or ugly. Isn't the essence of a skeleton? In this era, it was dangerous for a woman to be good-looking, but it was not necessarily safe for a man to be good-looking. A skeleton. Jiang Pingji smiled. This guy is interesting. How could he not be interesting? In this era, one's appearance affected one's fate as an official, and one's appearance was also an important criterion for being an official. But that guy said that appearance was not that important. Otherwise, he was just standing there and talking, pretending to be serious. Or he really thought so and he was quite aware of it. Han Yu knew that Jiang Pingji would leave for Langyi in a few months. He smiled and said, if so, we will be classmates by then. But Lanting, you don't have to rush. You can go to Langyi in 3 or 4 months. Why? It was Feng Jin who asked. Han Yu said helplessly, Huayu, did you forget that in 3 months, the students who passed the initial assessment will go to Shangjing for the final assessment? This year, there are many students who passed the preliminary assessment. Master Yuanjing may personally escort them to Shangjing. I remember that Lu County Chief is this year's General Assessment Officer. He will also go to Shangjing. If Jiang Pingji went to Langyi according to the original schedule, half of the academy would be empty. The most important thing was that Master Yuanjing would not be there. She thought for a while and said, if so, I will go to Shangjing with my father. After the assessment, I will follow Master Yuanjing to Langyi. It will be on the way. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.